across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Lots to get through this afternoon. One of Britain's leading pollsters. Now, this is interesting. This is Sir John Curtice, much respected across the board, has said that Reform UK is now even more likely to win the next general election. Issues such as Brexit, national identity, immigration mean that those who back the party are no longer casting a protest vote. Sir John Curtice joins us a little later. Do you believe it is now all but guaranteed that Reform will win the next general election? Our lines are open. There are some caveats to that question. I'll come to those in just a moment. As you've been hearing, that shocking body cam footage has been released showing the moment police officers handcuffed 18-year-old victim Henry Novak as he lay dying. It has led, understandably, to widespread outrage over how the police believed that he was, in fact, the perpetrator of a racist attack. We'll show you this a little later. And research finds the UK's growing green economy, the green economy no less, is worth more than £100 billion a year, bringing more jobs and higher wages. Do you believe all this guff? 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. And of course, we'll bring you all the breaking. There's always a bit of breaking news, isn't there, on the afternoon show? Lots to get through. So, the Westminster class. Let's look at the Westminster class, who still insist that Reform is kind of a protest party and a vote for them is a protest vote. It's a bit like insisting a house fire is actually a minor heating issue. Sir John Curtice. Now, no one is more respected in the polling department than Sir John. He had the royal sword doffed onto his shoulders a few years ago for this very reason. Sir John Curtice's latest analysis suggests Reform support is increasingly ideological, not merely a temporary tantrum from voters who forgot where they left their Labour membership card. This is for real, and that should worry the establishment. Protest votes come and go, of course. Political realignments that we're seeing now tend to stay for dinner. Now, yesterday's polling showed that Reform are level with Labour among trade union members on 28%. Let's just digest that sentence again. Reform voters are equal to Labour voters among trade union members. This was exclusively the domain of the left. I mean, there wasn't even any doubt about it. Invariably, you know, a Labour left, Blair, Brown, whatever, wasn't left-wing enough. Now, the same amount of people in those unions are looking at Reform. Union members, those mythical creatures supposedly living permanently inside Labour's electoral pocket. It has changed. Meanwhile, farmers are drifting in large numbers towards Reform, with one industry survey putting support as high as 40%. That is massive. People are joining Reform because they believe the party is talking their language. This is the obvious stuff: immigration, identity, borders, crime, economics, stagnation in language that sounds recognisably human rather than assembled by a committee of risk-averse HR managers, which is what we've had quite recently. They may not agree with everything, but they know what Reform actually stand for. That's the point, isn't it? You feel it, you can see it, it's tangible. You can touch it, for goodness sake. The potential danger, of course, and there is, I mentioned caveats a second ago. The potential danger here actually comes from Restore Britain. Now, this is a tiny party. It's only been a party for such a short period of time. Some really do see it as a protest organisation. This is Rupert Lowe's insurgent project. But it is attracting voters who think Reform have become too cautious, too professional, and even too Westminster. Ironically, Reform's biggest threat may be the same anti-establishment energy that actually created it. How weird is that? People are leaving because once you become the rebellion, something else inevitably turns up claiming that you have become the establishment. And that's sort of what I think Mr Farage is dealing with. British politics, we know this because we talk about it a lot. It increasingly resembles a pub fight where everyone agrees the management are useless, but nobody can fully agree who should throw the first punch. And that's where we're at. And this is absolutely key. Sir John's findings, his central argument is that reform's growth since 2024 has been driven more by ideology than by dissatisfaction. And that's key. The study found that newer reform voters are joining because they share reform's social and cultural outlook, not simply because they're angry with Labour, the Conservatives, the NHS or the economy. They've actually got a reason and can see it, feel it and want to vote for it. Now, this is good news in some respect for the Conservatives and other parties who can look at this and say, OK, so this is the base we're working from. These are the new ground rules. Do you believe reform will win the next election? Is that a given now? But I do want to throw this out. Are you one of those that was a reform voter but has now thought, actually, I think Restore are speaking my language? There's a sort of central allegation that reform, well, they're just like the Tories now. In fact, even half of the high-profile people we're seeing on the front line of reform were Tories like 2 minutes ago. Jenrick, Braverman, etc., Kruger. So if you were a reform voter, why have you gone elsewhere? And where have you gone to? Have you gone to the Tories? Have you gone to Restore UK? If you used to go elsewhere, why have you become a reform voter? Let's look at it the other way around as well. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. Let's get a word from Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor with us. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always nice to have you with us. It's worth having a little listen before we kick too much into this. On this ideological drive, what it's all about. Let's have a listen to the leader of reform, Nigel Farage, speaking after what I suppose was a rather graphic and very obvious piece of evidence of the political shift, speaking after last month's local election results. Here he is.
But I think overall what's happened is a truly historic shift in British politics. We've been so used to thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and yet what Reform are able to do is to win in areas that have always been conservative, but equally, we're proving in a big way, we can win in areas that Labour have dominated, frankly, since the end of World War I.
Now, I know this stuff fascinates you as well, Oscar, this kind of shift and the speed, I suppose, that this has all happened. And, you know, one could argue forever, perhaps that speed, the acceleration wouldn't have been so great if it wasn't for social media and the sort of 24-hour world we now live in when it comes to news and debate, etc. So there's some of that going on. But I thought the fact that this came from John Curtis and his research on this, suggesting that this is that the support for reform is it's not about rebellion. It's not a protest vote. These are people who are ideologically driven and attracted to a new idea.
Yeah, and that was always going to have to be, if Reform are to win the next election, that kind of sociological, if you like, shift was going to have to happen, because protest parties are that. And I think that's potentially why they are the price that comes with that, the cost of that is the movement that is building behind Restore. And you get this almost Russian doll effect in politics. And, you know, if Restore were to grow and grow, then, you know, Ben Habib's party perhaps gets a little bit more airtime and traction, yeah, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, there was a Times front page yesterday, which I think was, you know, I am a conservative, so I don't say this with any glee or joy necessarily, but how the trade union kind of voter was drifting to Reform.
Yeah.
And I mean, that for me was absolutely seismic. You know, it is that socially conservative, but it is also that that real 2019, dare I say, I'd say even more so kind of entrenched than the 2019 Red Wall vote we saw go to the Tories. That even more entrenched kind of traditional left wings and actually left-wing socially conservative values that are now being owned and hoovered up by Reform. And so when Farage gets that, you know, from the Restore sensibility out there, when he gets that pushback and he gets, oh, you guys are becoming the establishment, you're catering to X, Y, and the other, you can see why he has to do that. Because ultimately, if he is to win, if Reform are to win the general election, they have to put their arms around that cohort of people. It is the only way.
It's interesting, Oscar, that the old kind of working men's clubs, not just exclusively in the north, but these were sort of labour clubs, usually seen, you know, probably a picture of Harold Wilson or somebody on the wall, and but curiously, they weren't kind of Owen Jones lefties. These were left-wingers that were patriotic. They would have had very robust views on immigration as well, and you can begin to see how that ideology does chime with the kind of reform voter base. I was speaking to a guy who was in fact, he was a fella doing some plastering at my house. I might have mentioned this to you before. Who
you did.
Suddenly announced a couple of years ago that he was the reform candidate for Barking, and I thought, what, really? Wow, he came about third or something like that. But he was he said, I'm actually a Labour man. He said, I'm a kind of Tony Benn like. Labour voter. You know, I'm against the EU. I have strong views on immigration, maybe for slightly differing reasons, but I still have those views. So you can kind of see that correlation.
Sure, and there will be people in the Labour Party, those traditional Labour voters and MPs, crucially, who are in despair at how they have drifted away from those people. I think, if I'm honest, like, yes, it's immigration. You can go issue by issue as to like what this type of voter is and why they're going to reform. I think, in short, it's like these people are common sense, right? These people care about the practicalities of life, and they've watched, you know, the traditional left of politics in this country drift away into absolute, you know, bull, you know, just like ridiculous, you know, like identity politics and, you know, virtue signaling and just all this like random kind of rubbish that when you are from a traditional working class community, you're going like, what the hell are you guys talking about? It's like this ridiculous academic rubbish. And that's not in a, sorry, Ian.
No, go on.
When I say academic, I don't mean that in a condescending way.
No, I know you don't.
I just mean like academic as in like, you're not talking about the real world and policies that affect my life.
Indeed. And I do wonder, however, and we've got Sir John Curtis coming on with us in about 15 minutes, so we can ask him this, but this is all very impressive stuff, and, you know, he believes that reform will certainly win the next election. Winning the election and becoming the government are two slightly different things, of course. You can,
as we've seen with this lot, yeah, absolutely.
Indeed. So, I mean, it may still mean that they've got to get into bed with someone. They might be over the line. Perhaps not a majority, maybe just enough to kind of, you know, hop along unless they have the assistance of a party like the Conservatives.
Potentially. I mean, I if I'm honest, though, before it even gets to that, and I think you said this before, and I totally agree, that those kind of deals and alliances may need to come even after polling day. You know, just it'll be a huge kind of desperate scrabble, potentially. I think reforms ultimately, they will be their own worst enemy if they don't win the election. I think there is a discipline issue. I think there are a lot of big, huge, like if you create a political pirate ship, right, which is what they are ultimately, you know, and I kind of admire that about them. That pirate ship has got to stay disciplined, which is slightly, you know, counterintuitive in a way. And I think that's going to be their big issue, keeping together.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's going to be fascinating how this one pans out. But I was rather sort of, I suppose, intrigued by Nigel Farage's statement today with reference to this horrific killing of Henry Novak. And we'll come on to the Farage thing a little later in terms of his comments on it. But, I mean, certainly what we do know is that this footage that has been released has absolutely shocked the nation. We spoke yesterday as to whether it should be released, and there's a bit of a divide on that. I would like to think this was released with parental consent, given that it's arguably one of the worst things I think I've probably ever seen. So we'll play you a shorter clip here, and I'll warn you that it is distressing to see and to listen to. It's deeply upsetting because we know what the outcome was. Incredibly haunting, but this is the moment that the police were trying to did arrest poor 18-year-old Henry Novak as he lay dying.
saying he's been stabbed, so
Where
let's
is it
just
you
check
think you've
him.
been stabbed?
He hasn't been.
In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
That's fine.
Right.
In the face?
Just get these to back off, get their details and that, and I'll keep hold of him.
Now, I mean, it's interesting, the voice you can hear in the background saying he hasn't been stabbed is likely to be either the person that stabbed him or the brother of the person. They knew he'd been stabbed, and yet this poor boy is laying dying, and they're doing nothing to assist in any kind of way. The mother took the knife away. She awaits sentencing, and I think a whole trial, in fact, perhaps. But and the father and the brother, I mean, this is just... everything about it is murky and haunting, and we will never really get over the... and I'm sure, you know, if you had the officer sitting here right now, he would give you a different version of events as to how they jumped to these conclusions. I don't know. I can't imagine it. I have no idea why a guy who was clearly, if nothing else, pretty much unconscious, needed to be handcuffed like that. That, to me, seems extraordinary. And I don't think we're going to hear the end of it, but it's interesting that Nigel Farage... and it does feed into our first story. It's not about making politics out of something so grim, but it is about feeling the pulse of a nation, isn't it? And speaking on behalf of that nation. Farage did that this morning, whether people agree with him or disagree with him. Kemi Badenoch waded in with a pop and said, no, we shouldn't be talking in this way. Let's talk about what we've got in common, not what our differences are. But this story isn't and shouldn't disappear from our headlines right now.
It's one of the most horrific things I've ever seen in this country. I think Farage and Kemi, in different ways, hit very particular, difficult to hear notes that we all need to hear right now. I would tend to err on Kemi's position, which is that we have slightly been labeling each other and putting each other into different kind of identities and categories as a result of what happened with George Floyd, I think, in this country.
Yeah.
And we've slightly lost the plot on it. And John Hinder as well, who was a former police officer and Labour MP, I thought he spoke brilliantly on it. And he said what the police reaction, and you're right, if the police officer was in your studio right now, he would give his account and, you know, but it was unfathomable, he said, what he saw. The dismissiveness, the, you know, cuffing someone who is seconds away from dying, ultimately.
And even if, you know, my goodness, OK, you know, I wasn't there, none of us were there, I get that bit. But there is a point when you see something with your own eyes and think, look, this lad, if nothing else, is clearly almost unconscious. And
he's desperate.
He's clearly desperate, and I know that the I can't breathe line is apparently well used by anybody who's about to get arrested, and that perhaps is what the police will respond with. I don't know, but it was quite clear that poor Henry was, if at best, as far as those initial officers were concerned, in a bad way in some respect. And stick him in handcuffs, sitting him up, sitting him down. I mean, the guy was drowning in his own blood at this point.
If we as a nation, and I'm really not trying to politicize this, because a poor young man has died, and I watched his father on the steps, and what the courage. I mean, oddly, that made me feel just so kind of proud to be British.
Yeah,
there was I just saw a man there, and I was just in awe, like his strength and the statement he read. But as a nation, something has gone wrong, where if police officers and authorities are potentially more worried about being perceived as, treating someone from a certain background overly harshly because of the politicized nature of where we've been over the last few years, and that kind of oversensitivity perhaps at the expense of a young lad who is dying on the street, we need to have a big reset as a nation.
We'll talk more on this a little later as well. We've got Brendan O'Neill joining us to discuss this too. Oscar, stay with us. More stories still to come. Oscar Reddrop with us on the programme. 0344 499 1000. I should just say, by the way, in the last few moments, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has told his cabinet the police watchdog's investigation into how officers handled this case of Henry Novak amid outrage over his treatment must be, quote, carried out as quickly as possible and answers delivered. That's the latest statement from Downing Street. This is Talk.
What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances. Remember the reaction to that? Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians? And indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this. Silence. We're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
24 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. Oscar Reddrop is with us, former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Let's move to this story. It's the Mandelson files, Oscar. Not quite. I mean, lots of bells and whistles around this, obviously. We haven't yet sort of had a bullseye moment in this latest tranche. I suppose if you're an anorak about it, there are some. I thought the best or the most interesting line out of it, I mean, there was a bit of an attack on Wes Streeting, but I thought it was Pat McFadden's comment that all we seem to do is sit around working out how to tax people and give people more benefits. I thought that was the most fundamental thing I've read from this so far.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I thought that I actually found that deeply troubling. If you zoom out in terms of the Mandelson stuff, why isn't it really kind of catching fire right now? I think that's down to the mere fact that Keir Starmer, who is ultimately the guy who is, you know, bobbed, weaved, dived, dodged from his decision to appoint Peter Mandelson ultimately, feels somewhat past tense right now. And so, you know, like, I think there is a feeling, not amongst, you know, not just your listeners and viewers, but very much within the Labour Party, that Keir Starmer isn't going to be around for the long haul. So as a result, you know, the damage has been done. You know, he's twisted and turned, and I think the great British public out there don't need to see a 2,000 gazillion million page document of, you know, released files to make their mind up on this issue. They know what Keir Starmer, the horrific decision Keir Starmer made on this. They know Peter Mandelson's character, and they've made their mind up on it. But to get, actually, for me, the nugget that you're absolutely right to hint at of Pat McFadden saying, I feel like, you know, what was it? I feel like I'm basically just in meetings deciding on, you know, where to spend taxpayers' money on people who, I can't remember the exact quote, but it just absolutely right there, you know, nakedly just showed how broken our government is, that we just sit around, and all your listeners who go to work every single day, get up bloody early in the morning, probably have more than one job in their household, their money is just like a little kind of casino chip in a government meeting somewhere that is ultimately dished out to pay for something for people that don't work.
Yeah.
And that for me it's so wrong. It is so wrong.
Do you think, I mean, I don't know if any more damage can be done to Keir Starmer over the Mandelson thing, really, but I suppose what it does, it just sort of keeps it fresh in people's minds, certainly within his own party as well, because we know that within a matter of weeks, quite literally within a matter of weeks, there could be a challenge to his leadership. And this kind of stuff is not going to be helpful for Mr. Starmer.
Not at all. And if you, I mean, look, they've been in power for about around just under 2 years now, 2 years or so.
Yeah.
I reckon a good quarter of that has been, the bandwidth has been sucked out of those 2 years on dealing with this Peter Mandelson affair. I mean, that for a Labour government that have been out of power for, you know, nearly a generation, is shocking. And I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back, the Mandelson affair, with a lot of voters, in terms of like, there's no coming back here for Starmer, and amongst Labour MPs. And then weirdly, the files turn into a kind of who's up, who's down, you know, in terms of like ministers, because either Keir Starmer does stay on, wouldn't rule it out, feels unlikely, but would not rule it out. And it'll be a case of, you know, he'll have to do a big reset amongst his ministers, or we'll get a completely new lot. And again, where they sit in that cabinet reshuffle, you know, these files, they would have been deep. So Pat McFadden, for example, he's looking pretty good right now, because I think he exposed a horrific truth of government. Yeah. Whereas someone like Wes, less so.
Well, apparently Britain can grow. Let's move to this story, Oscar, and that's if we adopt the green, or embrace the green economy with open arms, because according to the CBI, the green economy is now worth 105 billion quid a year. Now, that's sounds a lot of money. It's about 4% of national output, but the report says around 300,000 people work directly in green sectors, rising to 1.1 million when supply chains are included as well. Now, what's interesting, but there used to be a group in the States, I don't know if they were called Republicans for the Environment, or Republicans, or Green Republicans, or something like that. I'm sure it still exists in some form, but their point wasn't about, you know, let's save the lesser spotted silver newt in Venezuela. It was all about there's money in them there green hills. Let's go get it, boys. It was as simple as that.
Yeah, and that's, I think, as a conservative, again, you know, conserve, I net zero to me is mental, because it absolutely hits, you know, and even Blair is saying this now, thank God, you know, that it absolutely, it's ludicrous. It is damaging and hits, you know, the poorest in society, where we do not have that luxury. But if it's a green job, if as long as the government gets out the way of it, if there is money to be made in green industries alongside the traditional, industries and energy supply, then absolutely we should make it as easy for people to get for growth in those sectors, and for those sectors to grow, and those private businesses to grow and employ people, and not overtax them, and not, you know, do national, you know, employers tax right and all that kind of stuff. I'm so for it. You know, it for me, it is about jobs, economy, prosperity. And yeah, if as a result of that, there is policy that is better for the world we live in and our environment, brilliant. But this whole net zero or nothing, no North Sea drilling stuff is ludicrous.
Cutting the nose and spiting the face and all the and all the rest of it. Oscar, we've hit the clock, but lovely to see you again. Thank you, as ever, for your time. Oscar Redrop, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Anything you've heard there, throw it in our way, 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well if you want to. We're going to speak to Sir John Curtis in just a second as well on that really interesting set of results in this latest research that suggests that Reform will win the next election, and it's not about a protest vote. These are people that are ideologically wedded to the idea of Nigel Farage and his party. Sir John Curtis coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 1:30. Now, one of Britain's leading pollsters, Sir John Curtis, says Reform UK is now even more likely to win the next general election. He says voters driven by a distinctly conservative ideology are no longer simply registering a protest vote, with issues such as Brexit, national identity and immigration now dominating their reasons for backing the party. Let's have a listen to Nigel Farage, a reminder of him speaking just after those local elections a month ago.
But I think overall what's happened is a truly historic shift in British politics. We've been so used to thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and yet what Reform are able to do is to win in areas that have always been conservative, but equally, we're proving in a big way, we can win in areas that Labour have dominated, frankly, since the end of World War I.
That includes union voters, members as well. We'll talk to Alex Wilson shortly, Reform UK London Assembly member. First, Sir John Curtis joins us now. Sir John, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you, Ian.
Always nice to have you on. Listen, I mean, I always think your job years ago, you know, when you used to look at your computer screen, you know, it had 3 blocks there, a red one, a blue one and a yellow one. Before that, flip charts looked the same. Now, it's like a Dulux colour chart, isn't it? The amount of parties we have and the choice that is out there has grown beyond recognition, and at a rather fast rate of knots as well.
Yeah, we now have 5 political parties that are able to register at about 12% or more in the opinion polls. Indeed, the 2024 general election was the first election in British history in which 5 political parties fought more or less every constituency across Great Britain, something that wasn't perhaps noticed too much at the time. So yes, we've seemed to have seemingly moved from an era of 2.5 party politics to an era of 5 party politics, of which Reform is obviously part.
Indeed. Bad news for the Conservatives, this really, because I think for a long time, with Reform's star rising, and they've had a few wobbles on the way, and we'll explore those, but the Conservatives have always sort of worked on the basis that these are protest voters, they'll soon come back to us at some point, they've just got the hump momentarily, but once everything's tickety-boo, will be fine. Your research shows that really isn't the case.
Yeah, well, Nigel Farage, of course, said he wouldn't re-enter British politics. This was before the 2024 election, unless he thought there was a chance of being able to replace the Conservatives as the principal party of the centre-right in Britain. And that is, frankly, the project on which he has been primarily embarked ever since, and he's having quite a substantial degree of success. I mean, what today's research essentially shows is that when you look at both in terms of the demography of Reform supporters and also their attitudes, they are the people who voted for Brexit in 2016. They are the people who voted for Boris Johnson and therefore for the Conservatives in 2019 to get Brexit done. But they are now the people who have primarily left the Conservative Party and who now have switched to Nigel Farage. So, you know, Brexit is at least what the crucial catalyst behind all of this. Just under half of those people who say they would vote to stay out of the European Union are currently Reform supporters. Level amongst those who voted Remain is less than 1 in 10. And as a result of that transfer, support for the Conservative Party now is barely any higher amongst those who are in favour of Brexit as opposed to those who are against. They've basically lost the Johnsonian coalition. It's
interesting, isn't it, in terms of, if you look at a lot of the criticism that Keir Starmer gets, I mean, there's a whole... We explore a whole range of criticism. But to be fair, any sitting Prime Minister is always going to get a little bit of jip just by dint of being there. But one thing I sense that has been rather central to the criticism of Starmer is that we don't really know what he stands for. And the Conservatives similarly are having a bit of that as well. Who are they really? With Reform, it's very definitive, isn't it? People do know what they stand for. And I was sort of reminded of this today, really. And I often talk about politicians reading from those prepared press releases that all sound rather clipped and clinical. You don't feel anything coming from the gut. You don't feel that furnace of anger or joy, whatever it happens to be, coming through. It's just, I've got to read this. Somebody wrote it for me, and this is what I have to say. This morning, Mr. Farage was talking about the death of Henry Novak. Now, as far as I can see, he's the only party leader that convened a podium and a moment and a camera to make a statement such as this. But it's a great example, really, I guess, John, of this difference that Mr. Farage, whether people love him or hate him, he does have that talk from the heart, talk from the gut, talk people's language, and that seems to be the bit that's missing elsewhere and the thing that Reform have in bucket loads. Yeah, missing elsewhere except for the Greens, because Zach Polanski, again, has a lot of similar qualities. And one of the reasons, I mean, there are structural changes in our politics which help to explain why Conservative and Labour are in so much trouble. But there are also contingent considerations, and undoubtedly one of those is leadership. It so happens. We can argue about how far it's an accident and how far it's a product of the way in which politics is and politicians get bred these days. But neither, frankly, Kemi Badenoch, nor Ed Davey, nor Keir Starmer, but particularly Keir Starmer, seem to be very good at communicating with the wider public. Yes, Nigel Farage is brilliant at it. And yes, as you say, he sees the moment. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, the research says, you know, the more conservative values that Reform voters believe in is indeed sceptical about equalities policies. Some of these policies that are designed, for example, to say, well, let's try and get rid of some of the inequalities suffered from people from an ethnic minority background. And obviously part Nigel Farage's message this morning in the wake of the sad death of Henry Novak is that indeed that perhaps the balance is tilted a bit too far in the other direction. And that is something that Reform are frankly regularly repeating. So Mr. Farage, yes, his charisma is absolutely central to Reform's success in his ability to articulate the concern about immigration, the concern about equalities policies, the belief in Britain that is central to Reform's message, also to a fair degree scepticism about net zero. And while Zach Polanski can do the very opposite, he will stand up and say, I want more migrants, and I think equalities policies are a good thing, and I think we should be allowing trans people to be able to get legal recognition more easily. So that the two of them are at the far end of the spectrum, and obviously both have plenty of have their critics. But the point is,
at least everybody knows where they stand, whereas in the centre it looks, shall we say, a little bit mushy.
Well, I was sort of reminded of this after Mr Farage had given that speech. Kemi Badenoch was speaking to ITV, and she said what Mr Farage, I'm quoting here, she said what Nigel Farage is doing is reinforcing the difference. I've said we need to find out what we have more in common, not what separates us. I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter or White Lives Matter. We all matter. Now, intellectually, you know, that might get you a house point. Doesn't sound very on message of anything, really. I don't imagine that resonates when people go to work and they're driving in their van, having been up since 5:30 in the morning, thinking, oh, very sensible words from the leader of the opposition. In fact, what Nigel Farage said resonated. What Kemi Badenoch said probably didn't.
Yeah, one of the problems that both Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch face, and it's, this is irrespective of their qualities as leaders, is that politics is no longer simply a politics of left versus right. Again, this is one of the things that comes out of the research. So it's no longer simply a debate about how much inequality is there in society and how much, if anything, should we do about it versus, well, actually, should we be focusing on the economy and trying to improve the economy, and then we'll have the, as David Cameron used to put it, the proceeds of growth from which everybody can be made better off. That's still a part of our politics, but it's only part of our politics. The other part of our politics are these culture wars issues, these issues between social liberals and social conservatives. And that is above all what defines Reform voters. Reform voters are a little bit right-wing, but they're actually on some issues not as right-wing as Conservative supporters. Yeah. But what defines them above all is that social conservatism on immigration, on equalities policies, on similar issues. And the truth is, it's Keir Starmer spent much of the last Parliament as leader of the opposition trying to bridge that divide without a great deal of success. And Kemi Badenoch wants to get those voters back from Reform, but so far at least she has not been able to find the messages that seems able to resonate with them sufficiently for them to say, well, actually, maybe Farage is not such a good idea. At the moment, she's focusing primarily on actually, Reform, according to her, make policies up on a fag packet. They're not really thought through, which, may or may not be a reasonable criticism. But as you say, it's going to take more than that to prize voters away from Reform. Indeed.
Sir John, great to have you on. As ever, thank you. Sir John Curtis, polling expert, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you to him. I'm just so fascinated by this. It's game-changing in terms of where we are. I said it at the beginning, this isn't about a protest vote, this is about appetites changing. You can pick apart, you can be smug about it, you can be elitist about it, you can be traditional about it. There is a reality. Reform are doing really well, and the reason they're doing really well is because they're speaking people's language. That, I think, seems to be mostly the case. On that point, and of course I mentioned that Nigel Farage mentioned Henry Novak this morning, and gave a very impassioned speech and statement about what has gone wrong with society. Now, you can pick that apart and disagree or agree with some of it, but it's crucial to who he is and who his party is. Right now, by the way, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is giving a statement on this, and I appreciate the case has only just been, or the perpetrator has only just been sentenced, but we've really heard nothing at all from the government on this whatsoever. And I'd half forgotten about this, but no, in fact, it's a lie. I hadn't forgotten about this. I came across it this morning, but up until then, I had forgotten about it. Teresa says, Ian, 6 years ago, both houses of Parliament, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, held a minute's silence after the death of George Floyd following a debate by crime and policing. Where, oh where, is the compassion for young Henry? It's absolutely true that they did. They had a minute's silence in the House of Commons for the death of a man 4,000 miles away. I mean, it was just, when you look back at that, it's just utterly extraordinary. Nigel Farage has tapped in to that. Let's speak with Alex Wilson, former Reform UK London Assembly member. Afternoon to you, Alex.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. Now, of course, great news for your party when you see a respected pollster like John Curtis saying, look, this is, no longer a protest vote. This is, these are people that are engaged with reform. They get what they stand for. They align with what they stand for. They agree with what they stand for. So good news for reform. Doesn't mean everything's tickety-boo and everyone's home and dry and there's a 500-seat majority coming up in 2029. But there's no other party making this kind of headway.
No, it's absolutely fascinating research from Sir John. Now, I follow elections and have done for a great long period of time, and Sir John Curtis is the most respected pollster, academic, professor of politics and elections going. So to hear from his research that reform is not just a flash in the pan, it's here to stay, it's building a core vote of its own, is really, really encouraging. I mean, it matches what I see on the doorsteps when I go out canvassing regularly. It matches what we've seen in 300 plus consecutive national opinion polls where reform has been in the lead. And of course, those council elections, both last year and this year, and the almost weekly cycle of council by-elections where reform is making progress at the expense of the Conservatives, at the expense of Labour, but cementing our own position as a major player in British politics. And I think it's fascinating and very encouraging to have that validated by the research of someone as well respected as Sir John.
What do you say to, not to rain on any parade here or anything, Alex, but, we're all grown-ups talking about this intelligently. This Restore Britain vote, which may or may not make a difference at up-and-coming by-elections. It may or may not make a difference at a general election, but it's certainly an element of the pie chart that might be gnawing away a little at reform. And often the criticism is that, well, reform are just like the Conservatives now. Restore are the real deal. What do you say to that?
Well, Restore have got a disgraced former Conservative MP running their campaign in that by-election. So I think it's a bit hypocritical of them to accuse anyone of being failed Conservatives. But it's an annoyance. I wish it wasn't happening. But I think the message that I would send to people who are considering voting Restore, think very, very carefully about what you're doing, because we have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to smash the established political system, Conservative Labour, swings backwards and forwards. We've now got an opportunity to do something different, but we can only do that if we all get on board behind reform, behind Nigel, and make sure that follows through at the ballot box. And those polling numbers are very, very strong, very impressive. Those election results, it's the same. And that's what we're here to do.
Do you, if it came to a general election and, reform win, but not by a significant majority to properly or effectively form a government, so then what happens then? As you go knocking on Kemi Badenoch's door and saying, please help us?
Well, let's not prejudge the outcome of the election. We're in it to win it. We're fighting hard. We'll be standing in every single constituency. As we did in the local elections, we had the highest percentage of wards covered by reform candidates, higher than any other party, because we want to win. We want to be a national party. Look, what we saw in those local elections just a few weeks ago was outside of London, the Conservatives have basically ceased to be a relevant force on a national level. If you look in Essex, the constituency represented by Kemi Badenoch would have fallen to reform if those local elections had been a general election. Likewise, James Cleverly, Priti Patel, Alex Burgott, they would have all lost their seats. The Conservatives are no longer the leading party on the right. They're becoming increasingly irrelevant. We're here to replace them. Let's not prejudge the outcome of that election, though. We've got to fight hard for every vote, for every constituency, see where the numbers lie afterwards. But no, we're certainly in it to win it and deliver a clear, decisive result for Reform UK. And if you look at what's been happening, keep talking about these local elections because they're so important as a measure of the progress that we're happening. And again, this chimes with what Sir John is saying about reform being firmly, properly established now, and not just a flash in the pan, not just a protest vote. If you look at the areas which had local elections last year and had local elections this year, places like Tamworth, Newcastle under Lyme, Cannock Chase in Staffordshire, Nuneaton and Bedworth in Warwickshire, places like that, Redditch in Worcestershire, they elected Reform county councillors last year, and now they follow that up by electing Reform district councillors this year. We're fully established now as a national party with a core vote growing of our own, and that's what we're here to do.
Alex, thank you. Alex Wilson, he is Reform UK London Assembly member. Thank you to him. Do you believe it is now all but sorted that Reform will win the next general election? There's a couple of specific groups of people. I mean, general views on it are all welcome. But if you were a Reform voter, but have gone elsewhere, and I'm thinking mainly Restore, although once in a while somebody does say, actually, I quite like the look of Kemi these days, so I've gone back to being a Conservative. Have you legged it from Reform to another party? the very opposite to that. If you used to go elsewhere, wherever it happened to be, were you one of those Labour voters? Were you a union member, firebrand union, RMT kind of NUT sort of character? And I thought, actually, I'll go with Nige, I think, and you've gone full circle. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000.
What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances. Remember the reaction to that? Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians? And indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this. Silence. We're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes in from Suze, who says, Ian, your guest, Red Drop, that was Oscar Red Drop we had with us earlier, Farage needs to keep everybody together. He wants to win if he wants to win the next election. Does he mean like Labour and the Conservatives have done? I actually think you might have got that the wrong way round, Suze. I think he was literally making that point. The other parties haven't done it, so if Farage wants to, then keeping it together is the only way forward. I think that's kind of what he was getting to. Let's talk to Daniel in Epsom on this whole reform story. I know this is an area, Dan, we've spoken about a number of times. You feel very strongly about this. You'd ideally like to see a more sort of right-wing coalition, but reform on their own could do rather well. What are you making of it?
Yeah, I actually think when push comes to shove and the British majority, that the most of the electorate are going to veer to reform, because we need to. We've done the same thing now for, what, 40, 50 years, even longer. Yeah. Red and blue, the uniparty. And things in this country have got worse and worse and worse. And I think if you're over, I mean, I'm 49, okay? And I sort of became an adult just as 1997 was turning. Mm-hmm. And since that point in time, you know, this country, there's so many things that are wrong with this country. I mean, the immigration issue obviously is the one that we've spoken about the most, but it's pretty obvious to most people now that mass immigration from the third world is pretty much destroying the fabric of our country, and no one's willing to do anything about it. And I think reform are. I think that law and order now is at an all-time low. I mean, theft is basically legal. You can go into shops and pick stuff up and walk out. There's violent attacks in our towns and cities. They don't even look like the towns and cities that we grew up in. They're unrecognisable. You know, they're like third world toilets. I mean, anywhere you have millions of people. Name me a city with a really high density of people from the third world that's really clean, safe and tidy. It's the opposite, isn't it? So, and these people in the unions, everyone's surprised. Oh, union men are thinking of voting reform. Of course they are, because they've got families. They notice that society is less homogenous, less safe. There's more crime. You know, immigration's out of control. We need someone to come in who's going to do something bold, you know, to leave the ECHR, actually do things. We've had 40 years of the Labour Tory Uniparty, and they've not done anything.
Yeah.
They've not done anything. They've been inactive, socialist, centrist. They haven't done anything. We need a government that does things, Ian.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And there is a potential problem here, Dan, and that is that Nigel Farage says all the right things, and of course the only proof will be once you get into government. And you know, we all learn a little bit more about this every day as to the difference between not being in government and saying lots of stuff and then becoming the government and realising, wow, this is turning an oil tanker around. But the one thing that Nigel Farage does do is that he speaks from the gut. You know, there is a sense that he's hit exactly the right note at exactly the right time.
Yeah, the thing is, I've met Nigel a few times. I ran for UKIP in the past. And what I will say about him is he means what he says, and he does have integrity. There's a lot of people from Reform saying, oh, he's part of the establishment, he's been nobbled. I don't think so. You know, having met him a few times, even in private, I bought a drink with him in the Westminster Arms, a couple of drinks, actually. And the reality is, he was saying those things 10, 15 years ago, and he doesn't need notes when he talks because he means what he says. And he actually, out of all the MPs, I think he's got the most integrity. And again, though, if he doesn't do the things that he says he's going to do, his feet will be held to the fire.
Absolutely, yeah. We may even, you know, I heard somebody say they think there'll be the quickest second election after an election in 2029. Didn't mention who would be in power, but there'll be an election and then 6 months later there'll be another one. But we get all these kind of crazy predictions now.
Yeah, but I would say to everyone out there, there's probably 72 million people in this country or more trying to use an infrastructure that's fit for about 50, right? Nothing publicly run works. Yeah. It's pretty obvious to most people that third world immigration is ruining our country. Something needs to be done. And that's why ordinary people, I ran for the Conservative Party once, right? Yeah. And I voted for them consistently, but there's no way I would ever do it again. Once bitten, twice shy. I think the first thing Kemi should have done when she got in is get rid of half of a party that were the reason she lost but she didn't do that. So they can't be trusted. Me and my friends and most of my family are all going to be voting Reform.
Listen, Daniel, on that point, thank you, mate. Always good to chat with Daniel in Epsom. Stuart Pembury says, Ian, are you really suggesting that Rupert Lowe hasn't spoken from the heart about Henry Novak? It must pain you every time Restore Britain gets mentioned. Well, I'm the one that mentions them. I raise them. I've asked the question. Stuart, have you legged it to Restore from Reform because you feel Restore is the better deal? I didn't even know Rupert Lowe had made any comment on Henry Novak. Doesn't surprise me that he would do. It's the kind of thing I would imagine he would engage with. But there is, unfortunately, for some smaller parties, an inevitability that, and even the Greens, whose apparently popularity seems to be rising for some curious reason, even they struggle with getting the same level of airtime and reference as other parties have got. So forgive me, didn't know he'd said anything. Doesn't surprise me that he would make a passionate and very heartfelt comment on this horrific event. We'll talk more about that in the next section as well. Your calls on Reform. Is it all but done that Reform are going to win? Incredible polling suggests they will. Will it be enough to form a majority government? That's another question. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news headlines now. It's 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yeah, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Lots to get through. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has called the murder of student Henry Novak by Vikram Digwa horrifying and evil. It comes after that shocking body cam footage was released showing the moment the police put handcuffs on him as he lay dying. We'll cover that and allow you to see that if you want to see it in just a few moments' time. Also this afternoon, one of Britain's leading pollsters, Sir John Curtis, says Reform UK is now even more likely to win the next general election. Issues such as Brexit, national identity and immigration mean that those who back the party are no longer casting a protest vote. They are ideologically wed to what I suppose is the new, as far as they would see it, new and genuine conservatism. Is that about right? And research finds that the UK's growing green economy is worth more than 100 billion quid a year, bringing more jobs and higher wages. The environmentalist Dale Vince joins us later in the programme. We'll bring you everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk. Coming up on 4 minutes after 2 o'clock. Well, the Home Secretary, as I mentioned, has just been speaking in the House of Commons. She's called the murder of Henry Novak by the Sikh man Vikram Digwa as horrifying and an act of evilness. And the body cam footage, which we've referred to throughout the show, we showed you a little bit of it in the last hour. This is the slightly longer version. There is a caveat to this. Whilst it is not explicit in terms of the usual things that make a violent scene explicit, it is horrifying and disturbing for obvious reasons. These were the last moments of an 18-year-old's life. Let's take a look at what happened.
He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up.
Right.
He's got a mouthful of blood, I don't want him... I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm. What's happened to you, right?
Been stabbed.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? I don't think you have, mate. What's your name, mate? At the moment you are under arrest, and that's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm in defence. If you do not mention when questioned, it's up to which you later line of court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, alright? He's going to be sick, I think. He's saying he's been stabbed, so
Where
let's
is
just
it you
check
think
him.
you've been stabbed? In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
No.
In the face?
Just get these to back off, get their details on that, and I'll keep hold of him.
There are so many reasons why that is horrifying, and we'll come on to some of that detail with Brendan O'Neill in just a moment. I do want to bring you Reform leader Nigel Farage responding to this case this morning.
He was actually treated in a way that meant an accusation of a racial slur was treated more seriously than an act of murder. What does he say? I can't breathe. Familiar words? Remember career criminal George Floyd, who died in appalling circumstances in Midwest America a few years ago. Remember the reaction to that and the way the police behaved. Within a few days, Keir Starmer was taking the knee. Black Lives Matter exploded all over the country. Churchill's statue was defaced, the cenotaph was vandalised. And yet, what has the public reaction been from our leaders and politicians, and indeed, to be frank, much of the media to this? Silence. Absolute silence. Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
Let's speak with Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked. Afternoon to you, Brendan. I mean, there are no words really to kind of explain how haunting and awful and distressing this is, and the footage we have all seen, most of us, many times now, sort of speaks for itself. I thought the point that Nigel Farage made there was poignant too. You know, this was an accusation of of racism with no evidence whatsoever, just an accusation of it. And immediately, within seconds, the guy's not just arrested, but despite being demonstrably almost unconscious, even if you don't know why, he's stuck in a pair of handcuffs. I mean, everything about this is mysterious, if that's the right way to put it.
Yeah, it's mysterious. It's horrifying. I mean, as you say, most people will have seen that footage by now. It's the most harrowing thing I've seen in a very long time. Those 2 minutes are very, very difficult to watch because what we have here is a boy, 18-year-old kid in absolute agony, can't breathe, gasping for air. At some level, he might even know that he's in the final moments of his life. He's just been stabbed numerous times. The man who stabbed him also ran after him, chased him, taunted him, filmed him, made fun of him. And then along come the forces of the state, the people you think will protect you and look after you, and they basically call him a liar.
Yeah.
They basically say, I don't think you have, mate, when he says that he's been stabbed. They drag him across the gravel. They handcuff him quite brutishly, pulling his hands behind his back, and they essentially say that he's making things up. It is beyond appalling. It is such a catastrophic failure of the state. And I think it's not enough for Keir Starmer to issue perfunctory statements about this. We need a real serious investigation into this incident and the ideology that might be underpinning it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the George Floyd comparison is being made. And you know, forgive me for saying this, some people will be maybe offended by me saying this, but when I look back at the whole George Floyd, the fact that the House of Commons had a 60-second silence, as did the House of Lords, it's almost beyond satire. I find it quite cringy and bizarre that the world lost its mind over an incident that happened to a habitual criminal, terrible as it was, but no one's defending what happened, and that's just a given for anyone who's, you know, got a scintilla of intelligence. We all know that, and we don't need educating on that, but the ripple effect across the globe was embarrassing, frankly.
It was crazy, and the comparison between that and what the elites have done in response to Henry Novak is extraordinary. It is such a telling moment for our times, because after George Floyd was killed in 2020, Keir Starmer took the knee, Angela Rayner took the knee, basically the entire political establishment took the knee, footballers took the knee. If you refused to take the knee, you were seen as a problematic, weird person. And as you say, we had a minute's silence in Parliament. The bourgeois left was on the streets putting their hands in the air and saying, I can't breathe. Where are they now? Where are these people who supposedly care about human life after an 18-year-old British boy in our own country was killed and mistreated by the police while he was dying? Where are they now? He said, I can't breathe as well. His death was also unjust. His death was also involved police neglect. And yet these people who took the knee are saying absolutely nothing. I think Keir Starmer is an embarrassment to this nation because he is happy to engage in American culture war after the death of a man 4,000 miles away. And yet he has only issued the most banal statement in response to the death of a British boy in our country in the most extreme circumstances. I think he's an embarrassment.
Yeah, and we have seen, sadly, in the build-up to this horror, we have seen other horrors. We mentioned Manchester, where the security guy was scared to report the, you know, odd guy with the rucksack because he thought he might be racist. We saw it with Southport, where a head teacher was told not to use terminology about a black boy with a knife because that could be offensive in its stereotype. And we saw it in Nottingham. In fact, I raised this one yesterday. Nobody ever remembers the story of Richard Everett, but the writer, I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Collins, but he's written quite a bit on this, and he wrote a piece in The Critic back in 2020 about a story of a young boy, Richard Everett, who I think it was 15 at the time, in North London. It was almost an identical murder to Stephen Lawrence, but it happened a year later, and no one has ever heard of it, despite all the similarities that exist. 12 months later, and no one thought fit to mention it. I think Michael is the only person I've ever known that's written on it, and that's extraordinary, but it's the same problem, really, that we're seeing here.
It's the exact same problem. And I think we now have a situation where the fear of being called racist or the fear of being called Islamophobic is creating all sorts of horrors and mayhem and injustice and even death. You mentioned the Manchester Arena bombing, where the security guard was worried about approaching this strange young man with a huge rucksack because he thought he would be accused of Islamophobia. Of course, there's the rape gang scandal, where thousands of working class girls were abused over a period of time, a long period of time, because officialdom was worried about being called racist and Islamophobic. We have numerous incidents, and now we have this situation in Southampton where a young boy was mistreated so disgustingly in the last moments of his life because the police have devoted themselves to this obsession with racism. You know, I think what's happened, Kemi Badenoch made this point earlier today, it seems that the police and the state more broadly have overcompensated for past incidents of racism. No one denies that there was police racism in the past, but we've overcorrected now, and we've now arrived at a situation where official anti-racism, as they call it, is the real nurturer of injustice. And I think unless we get a handle on this woke state and the barbarism that it is unleashing, I think we'll be in big trouble.
I think so. And we watched that that video, Brendan, and I mean, the handcuff thing is among the many, there's so many disturbing elements to it. But, you know, I've watched enough of those cop programs to see that the amount of times people don't get put in handcuffs is often quite surprising. And yet here's a kid that even if you didn't realise he'd been stabbed, but he was clearly in a bad way, he was unconscious almost. I mean, the idea, give us your wrist, the guy says at one point, you know, handcuffing him behind when he's gasping for breath. I mean, I don't even know where to begin on interpreting that. I'm sure the officer would have a very different interpretation of this, but you are forced into that same conclusion that you've brilliantly run over there, Brendan, that this is a kind of confirmation bias thing going on through lots of very bizarre training courses that establishments and goodness knows who else goes on. This is a grim and tragic manifestation of all of that. You know, you've even got somebody in the crowd, presumably the perpetrator or the brother, shouting, no, he's not been stabbed. It's like, I mean, what kind of person says that when someone is laying there dying?
Yeah, that really struck me as well. I think that may well have been the killer, or as you say, it might have been his brother saying he hasn't been stabbed. What was even more shocking is that the female police officer responds to that by saying, I know, but we have to check, don't we?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's so horrifying and despairing that the last thing this kid heard were the libelous taunts of the man who stabbed him, who was calling him racist, which was a false accusation. And he heard the police disbelieving him. He heard the police just brushing off his claims to have been stabbed, which he had been. He said, I can't breathe 9 times. And he said, I've been stabbed 4 times. And the police refused to believe him until he had lost consciousness. That's the only time they believed him. You know, if you read the judge's sentencing remarks in the sentencing of Vikram Digra yesterday, he says that Henry Novak was a wonderful kid. He was hardworking. He was incredibly loving towards his family. He was the first one of the family to go to university. So we're talking about an ordinary working family here with high hopes for their son. The fact that so many in positions of power are not talking about this boy, the fact that the left don't seem to give a damn about him, the fact that there is no knee-taking for this terrible crime, I think that really is indicative of how much contempt the establishment has for ordinary people. That's what we're seeing with this terrible case.
We are indeed. Brendan, thank you for your time. Brendan O'Neill, very thorough and powerful stuff, as you would expect from Brendan, chief political writer at Spiked. This isn't one of those stories that you know, every now and again a story comes along and you begin to digest it and you start to go, oh, right, now I can see why that person said this or did that. This just gets more confusing and more upsetting the more you watch it. And if you're a parent, you look at that and think, you know, if that was my child, and the statement from the father outside the court that was so eloquent that I actually thought when I saw it, I thought it was you know, how often families' words are spoken through the lawyer. But it wasn't. It was the dad talking about his little boy who was just 18. I've got a near 13-year-old. So here's somebody who's just 5 years older. And the innocence and the randomness and all the horror that goes with that. Night out, wasn't drunk or anything, would have been fine to drive a car. He had a beer or two at a pub earlier with some mates. He was a good kid. The accusation that was made against him of racism wasn't recognised by anyone that knew him, friends and those at university and those that he grew up with. This was just one of the good guys, and he was taken down by one of the real bad guys. And if you look now, you've got the old man who's now in trouble, the brother is in trouble, the mother's in trouble. This is a pretty grim family trail. And in many respects, when you start to read the kind of court details of this character's fascination with weaponry, and there's other footage, you'd have perhaps seen it online, of him boasting of the big sword he's got, kind of obsessed with it. And not only used it, but then tried to turn it around and pretend that he'd been the victim of race. He even says in the footage, look, I've got a swollen eye. But he didn't. He just made it up. And in all of this chaos, when bad people exist like this, someone who's prepared to use a knife on essentially a kid, a young 18-year-old, the one thing you hope, of course, is that those who come charging to the rescue, in this case the police, are going to try and make it at least better. And look, all of the pathology reports and all of the evidence suggests that they wouldn't have been able to save poor Henry, that the injuries were so substantial that it would have been unlikely that there was any chance of saving him. But that's not really the point here. The point here is the way that it was dealt with. Some half-wit makes a random accusation of racism with no evidence at all, just his voice. And the police turn up to the person who's apparently the racist on the ground, writhing around, gasping for breath, and arrest him. Now, I'm only going to say what everybody would say, and I'm not trying to be smart or, start some, row in an empty room. But had that been a black kid, this country would currently be on fire. I'm telling you that now. The riots we saw in 2011, which began over the Mark Duggan story, it would have been that and more. 0344 499 1000.
We need a change in culture. Enough of anti-white prejudice. A promotion of the idea that white lives matter just as much as black lives. An end to DEI and positive discrimination, but a country that treats everybody equally and fairly before the law. This is serious. This is urgent. I fear for where our society will be in a few short years if we don't grip this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And here's one of the problems with the 24-hour nature of social media and the like. A police officer has received death threats and has been forced to relocate to protect himself and his family after being wrongly identified online as being involved in the Henry Novak murder case. Shabana Mahmood has made this point. I saw this morning, and this destroys my soul, OK? I'm going to cut to the chase. This absolutely destroys me when I see this. This is a more serious case, but we've seen it all over the place, where some random halfwit, some clown, decides that they are going to post something on social media and a photograph and a name saying, this is the officer from that footage. It wasn't the officer from the footage. What would make somebody... Am I being naive here? I just think you don't need to do what I do for a living. You don't need to work in a big international newsroom as I do. You don't need to work for a huge media corporation as I do to know that that's a really stupid thing to do. Unless it's not as if there's not precedent on this when people have named somebody because they have decided, oh, a friend of mine told me, or one of my followers told me. That's the usual one. Or if this is true, which is, and again, some other clown shoe merchant wrote, if this is... No, you cannot do that. You don't need to be a journalist to know that. You don't need to work in the media to know that. A quick Google search will often tell you that you're wrong on your assessment. And, of course, in this game, you check, you double-check, you triple-check. You triple-source a story like that. We would never be allowed to name somebody because I mean, I saw one the other day, which was... again, a politician or a sort of local politician. I'm trying to think what... I think it was about a man claiming his daughter had been pulled out of had a packed lunch confiscated because it contained pork. And it was a heavily Muslim school. And it wasn't true. And a very swift Google search. And the person that originally posted it said, I'm just repeating what I was told. Like, that's OK. Really? You imagine a newspaper doing that? Or one of our listeners told us that Bob at number 57 is a paedophile, so we put it on the front page. You wouldn't do this. So now you've got a police officer in hiding because some fool decided to post on social media a full picture with no skill set or knowledge of the story or how to source it. Again, Google search would have probably done it. And if it wouldn't have done it, don't post it. And that's the sad world we're in. That happens in much more or much less serious ways all the time on social media with misinformation, all the time. And people say, what have you got against X and Twitter? Because it's full of arses like that who regularly post stuff without any knowledge, any proof, any idea whatsoever. It's more than a bear pit. It's more than a bit of Wild West mischief and a bit of fun. Yes, sure, you can have a giggle. Yes, I see the videos that make me chuckle as well. I see gobsmacking stuff and the odd row taking place in Smith's between two customers. It can be slightly amusing. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, that's the downside of social media in a tragic way. Let's go to Ron in Leicestershire on this story. Ron, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Well, first of all, I've got to identify who I am, but not actually my full name, my background. The reason being is when I say what I'm going to say in a moment, if you don't have my background, you will think I'm talking out of my posterior.
Okay.
So the first thing is I'm 70 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
I joined the army when I was 15 years of age.
Okay.
I'm ex-soldier. I'm ex-Royal Military Police. I am ex-civil police. For the majority of my service, I was a tutor constable. It was my job to teach people to be police officers. That was my job, to take somebody out of the factory for 10 weeks and hopefully put across to them how they should speak to people, how they should carry out various things. In addition to that, when I was 11 years of age, I did my first St John's Ambulance Brigade first aid certificate. And over the years, I got up to EMT, Emergency Medical Technician level. So I carried out first aid roles in the army, in the military police, in the civil police, across many very different things. So that's my background at the moment. So the first thing is, we've got to think about this thing called constable. Constable was a position that's been held in this country for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. You were the village constable, you were the town constable, you were the city constable, and you were given a power, a warrant. In them days, it wasn't a police warrant card, it was a warrant that you was given by the local sheriff, the local person, the head person. So the power of constable has been around for a long time. So when I joined the civilian police, within a couple of days, we were given a warrant card, which basically meant from that moment on, we had this. We didn't really know a great deal, but I'm ex-military police, so it meant that I knew a lot more than the average guy coming out the street. So when we look at this incident that happened, every officer that went to that scene is an individual constable. They have a warrant card. It is not a collective warrant card. It is an individual, which basically means if you come across an incident and there is somebody that needs arresting and your sergeant says, do not arrest him, as a constable, you can say, sorry, Sarge, I've just seen him breaking the law, and you go across and you arrest him on the power of your warrant. So at the scene, we've got this situation. Remember, I told you, 59 years experience first aid, up to EMT level, dealt with many, many serious injuries over my life. We have a situation where every officer that was there has the opportunity to look, to see, to do something, to not do something. And what happened in that scenario was you cannot stand back and say, yeah, I actually thought that that guy, which if you listen to the words that's being said in the background, somebody could have stepped forward and said, I'm going to swear. They could have said a swear word and said, but I am going to take charge. They didn't. So what I'm saying collectively, none of them that were there can actually say, no, it wasn't my job, mate. So all I'm saying there is I've watched it, and I'm a father of 3 children, and I actually wanted to puke. I actually wanted, because I've arrested thousands of people over my police career. I have watched people die. You know what I mean? And I'm actually watching a young 18-year-old boy die. I'm going to throw something into the mix. I married into the Sikh community. I married a Sikh woman. I have a little bit more knowledge of the Sikh community. And in general, I've got nothing but total respect. But what we have there is, this is what really upsets me. We have a brother that attempted to pervert the course of justice, right? For which he should have been arrested and he should have been charged and he should have gone to court. The Criminal Protection, CPS, the Criminal Protection Service did not make that decision because he phoned up to the operator and he lied through his teeth. We have somebody in the family got rid of the turban. The mother got rid of the knife. The police arrive and there is family members, including the father there, and they're listening to one of the offender, the murderer, lie through his teeth.
Right? And there's no evidence, of course. There's no evidence of a racist attack whatsoever.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But the thing is, though, they are lying. They are saying that he was racially assaulted. No, he wasn't.
But there's a kid. I mean, even if he had pulled this guy's turban off, which he didn't, by the way, but even if it was that, or even if he'd sworn at him in some kind of offensive way, the fact is they were all standing up. He was laying on the ground gasping for breath. So surely that's the point as a cop, and you know this. Well, yeah, you spring into action almost as a first aider immediately.
That's what you just proved my point. What I'm trying to say to you is that every police officer that comes out of the training centre will do so many hours of first aid training as part of their training cycle. They'll go back to their police force, they'll do more, and they will have to, before they wander out there, before they're given a truncheon, before they're given handcuffs, before they're given spray and all the rest of it, they have to do courses to allow them to have this piece of equipment. Before you go out in uniform on the street, you have to do a first aider's certificate. And I'm not too sure what it is now. I know that I went through weeks and weeks of it because I was a police support unit first aider as well. That's what I'm saying. I've had a higher level of first aid. But what I'm trying to say is you have a situation there where that never... OK, I want to cry. So we have a situation. Imagine you've been stabbed in the chest. You're bleeding internally. Somebody gets your... I think it was the left hand first, was handcuffed, and then the other arm was pulled in, and you could hear him kind of like basically screaming whilst he's semi-conscious, while his other arm is pulling the other arm into the handcuffs. I'm really upset about this because the reality, so imagine you've got a knife wound in your chest and you've got some idiot of a police officer is pulling at his chest, because that's what happens.
Of course it is. You pull someone's arm behind their back, it pulls at your chest. And this poor boy had a punctured lung at this point and he was drowning.
Oh, yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say at the moment is it's very difficult. My personal views are the officer that said, "Don't believe you, mate," he needs to be charged with misconduct in a public office and he needs to go to prison. Just from what I saw on the video.
Yeah.
The other officers around him, they all need... so what we've got supposedly, and again, how true is this? We've supposedly got one of the officers has resigned already. My understanding initially was there were 3 female police officers and then a 4th male came along and then more officers came up. I have no idea, because the police will not let anybody know, whether the female, I'm guessing it's female, unless it's the male, we don't really know, but somebody's resigned. We have a situation where we could have had a 6-month female police officer there, a 9-month female police officer, a 1-year female police officer, and a male police officer with 3 or 4 years experience, because that is what was happening now.
There is also just a final point on this, Ron, because I do have to move on, but I don't know if you saw the other bit of detail, that when the murderer was arrested, he wasn't put into handcuffs, which is kind of interesting. This obviously happened at some point later. And he was even allowed to go to the kitchen to get his food, because I'm guessing based on that headline, he said, "I've got special food requirements because of my religion," or something. All of that was still allowed. So he was never handcuffed when arrested for murder. But the victim found himself dying while handcuffed. Listen, Ron, thank you. That's a very powerful call from Ron, ex-military, ex-police of decades experience. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. What is interesting about the people that post this kind of nonsense on social media, including identifying the wrong police officer as being one of those in attendance of Henry Novak's murder. By the way, it wouldn't have been okay to post the right officer. That also would have taken you nowhere but down more carnage and difficulties for a load of other people. But what's fascinating is when you look at the posts where people have put this, there are hundreds and sometimes thousands of other posts going, "Mate, you take this down. This is not the right officer. Please take it down." And they don't. They leave it up. Now, I know you can say, well, it's probably a Russian bot or something, but I don't think that's always the case. At what point would you, as a human, if somebody said, you've literally put a random police officer up, identified the random officer with his name, it wouldn't be hard to find out what force, it wouldn't be hard to find out where he lived, and you've done, and when you've been told you've got the wrong bloke, you've carried it on. I want to weep sometimes or scream for the people we live among. 0344 499 1000. As you found out yesterday while we were on air, Downing Street released that nearly 1,500 pages of Mandelson files, describing it as the largest government document disclosure ever. The papers include WhatsApp messages in which Lord Mandelson called Number 10 beleaguered and bereft and claimed Sir Keir and his cabinet lacked verve. The files also show Mandelson declined to hand over information from his personal phone. And then shortly after it was released, the Prime Minister's Chief Secretary, Darren Jones, spoke to the House of Commons.
I hope that members appreciate the need not to prejudice the investigation and understand that I will not be able to answer questions about certain documents which have been withheld. No responsible government would wish to undermine a criminal investigation and put at risk the justice that it seeks, and I'm sure the House will share this position. I can, however, Mr. Speaker, confirm that this material does include questions put to Peter Mandelson by the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff and Peter Mandelson's responses.
Let's speak with David Maddox, political editor at The Independent. And reasonable to say, David, you were really the first journalist that highlighted that something wasn't quite right about this appointment of Mr. Mandelson. And, of course, well, so much so that you get mentioned yourself in this latest drop because Peter Mandelson's wondering about you.
Yes, I'm here to answer the question, who is David Maddox?
Yes, indeed. Here he is, everybody. Peter, if you're watching, this is David Maddox. He's been around the block for years at Westminster. You must have come across him. And if you haven't, that's your doing. I mean, curious times. Were you expecting something more from this latest, I don't like using that word drop, but I can't think of another one, but this latest release, shall we say? Because, yes, I mean, to me, there's a lot in there. We didn't sort of get a bullseye moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I thought was slightly disturbing about it, though, was how much was redacted. You know, how many kind of dots there were, how many blank pages there were, you know. There's a huge drop, a huge amount there. I mean, we're still all looking through it to see if there's any nuggets we missed and so forth. But it's... I thought that was quite disturbing. I know that various MPs are pushing on this to find out why stuff was redacted, because that wasn't national security stuff by the ISC and you know, the Internet Intelligence and Security Committee, which who were the only ones who were supposed to be redacting. So something odd's gone on there.
In terms of what you took from this, I mean, it was a lot of it was very typical Mandelson stuff. I thought, you know, he's having a pop at this person. He talks about the ineptitude of Downing Street. He almost, you know, he stopped short of saying it wasn't like that back in my day. You know, there was a lot of that going on. I thought the most interesting thing was actually the Pat McFadden reference, who said all I seem to do is sit around meetings all day, finding out how I can working out ways to tax people more and give more benefits away.
I think we can guarantee that Pat McFadden won't be the next Chancellor after
yes,
that particular revelation. I mean, the kind of big picture of it was that this, I mean, I think we all knew this, but they learned nothing from the failures of the last Tory government.
Yeah.
This was just a continuation of snide, rather offhand government by WhatsApp, all sorts of private messages going around each other's backs, making digs. I mean, I had to laugh about Mandelson accusing Wes Streeting of having an early midlife crisis and you know, being pathetic. I think a lot of us would probably agree, having seen him lately. But it's you know, it's just weird, and because none of it really helped Starmer. It just showed really a man out of his depth and out of control. I mean, you know, you could hardly argue with Mandelson's assessments.
This is true.
You couldn't argue with that. I mean, you may think he's a dreadful human being, but actually, he was pretty much on the money.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, we can say, you know, those in glass houses and all the rest of it. But actually, despite that, what he said, I think most people, whether they're journalists or not, would kind of concur with quite a lot of this. And I'm wondering whether, I mean, is there? We know there was some redactions in there. I understand some of it might be for security reasons. I can get it if a junior member of staff who's not public-facing gets referenced, then it's fair enough to get rid of that. And of course, the police talking about not scuppering their current investigation, because this isn't over yet, David, is it? There is still the legal matter of misconduct in public office.
Well, there's the legal matter, and there's also another tranche of papers coming, which I mentioned it before, the Intelligence and Security Committee have been dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, we've got yet more papers to come, I mean, which may have some killer moments. But I have to say that there was... I think the Prime Minister may have got off slightly lightly yesterday, because I think there was some things which really kind of shed light on some of the potential misleading of Parliament issues that he's been accused of, not least with that story we've talked about a lot about the security vetting issue. He said in April that the first he knew about it was then in April, and first Downing Street knew about it was in April. It's now confirmed from most papers that 2 days after I ran the story 7 months before in September, they were having email exchanges about it and about the reporting of it, about concerns that Number 10 SPAD's Tim Allen, who was Director of Comms at the time, was not getting the messaging right and trying to protect the Prime Minister from this very scandal, which then blew up 7 months later.
Well, it would be extraordinary. It was Tim Allen, of course, that you had that exchange with, which became public. And I mean, it would be extraordinary if, like, something as seismic as a journalist contacting Downing Street, that's where they didn't know about it, didn't get passed on anywhere. You know, really? I mean, that would be, it's beyond belief. It's laughably, completely untrue.
It certainly looks like Tim Allen wasn't talking to the Foreign Office about it, because they're literally complaining about it in these emails, and then they're sort of saying. Then you've got somebody from Downing Street who obviously is part of this and knows about this, quite a senior official in Downing Street, saying, you know, we've got to shield the ministers and Number 10 from this. Well, you know, clearly they knew that something at some point was going to blow up about this issue. And you know, 7 months before, as I'd run my story, they were preparing the groundwork. And in fact, you can see in the email some of the words that Keir Starmer would be using earlier this year.
Yeah. It could have been a sort of bizarre, I don't know, sort of Stranger Things episode where everybody's mind was erased of that that very short period. And then come April, they suddenly heard about, we'd never heard about this before. What, you actually did. You really did. You demonstrably did. There's no ways around this. Of course, for Keir Starmer, look, you know, it looks every bit that this fella isn't going to be running the show for much longer. So you could argue in some respects it doesn't make any difference. But I suppose it piles it on a bit more in that it highlights once again the curious enthusiasm that Number 10 had, and he's the head of it. He said sorry for it as well. The enthusiasm they had to appoint this man in the first place. It rather compounds that point, I suppose, if nothing else.
Yeah. I think one of the MPs nailed it yesterday when they said it's interesting that the victims of Jeffrey Epstein were not mentioned at all until after Mandelson was sacked. There's no mention in these historic papers whatsoever. It kind of confirms that they just really didn't care until, you know, it became a political problem for them.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, you know, as far as Keir Starmer's concerned, we all know he's finished. We all know he's looking at the exit door, whether he likes it or not. And that's probably why yesterday's release didn't really change things very much. Certainly didn't make people want him to stay. But it was, you know, it's very hard for more damage to be done to a Prime Minister who's on the way out.
Are we likely to see any more, and maybe this is where the Intelligence Committee kind of bits and pieces that they're looking at would come out. Of course, the sort of, if I've got this correct, David, correct me if not, but the investigation into Mandelson has really come around because of stuff that was in the Epstein files and these sort of exchanges of emails and if you like, unloading information that would clearly have been either market sensitive or, you know, certainly confidential. It's that kind of stuff that the police would be interested in, right? Because that would be where you would form a case against him for misconduct. Is there any more of that stuff around anywhere?
Well, I think maybe not so much Epstein, but possibly China and Russia. There's business links there. You know, there was certainly some concerns about that. I wonder as well about his business relationship with his company Palantir, which has suddenly become very controversial, and you know, was obviously trying to get defence contracts, for example. And he was apparently, you know, appeared to be using his position as ambassador to kind of further their case. Certainly, with one meeting in Washington, which was off the books, which he held with the Prime Minister. So there's, you know, there are certainly issues around that, which you'd hope the release from the ISC might actually shed some light on.
And in terms of the police investigation, I mean, it's impossible to tell, isn't it? You know, how long is a piece of string, I guess? You know, there's part of us that think, well, surely you could have this thing wrapped up, you know, a little quicker. But, I mean, it could even take the rest of this year for all we know.
I mean, it sometimes seems to take years to do these things. And this is a very difficult thing to prove as well. So, you know, they're going to have to go for an awful lot of evidence, an awful lot of, you know, there's a very high threshold to prove misconduct in public office.
Indeed.
So, you know.
It won't be dull, we know that much. We will speak again, though, David. Thank you for your time as ever. David Maddox, political editor at The Independent. Thank you to him. More comment coming in from you. Reference the horrific murder, the killing of Henry Novak. This comes from Caroline, who says, Ian, I'm a mum and grandma. What the police did to young Henry was criminal in itself. No care, no humanity to this beautiful young man in his dying moments. What has the police service become when they're more worried about themselves being named racists rather than seeing a cold-blooded lying murderer before their eyes? Shame on them. Nigel Farage is the only man brave enough to call it out for what it is. He has broad shoulders to take the venom of the mainstream. He and Reform are the only party to have the strength to tackle this anti-white racism that's grown over many years in institutions and been spoon-fed to our children. Powerful stuff, Caroline. Thank you for that. This one comes from Barry, who says, afternoon, Ian. Disappointing turnout in the Commons for the Henry Novak murder statement. I'm surprised the Speaker didn't declare a three-line whip. Well, the reason for that, the Speaker can't declare a whip. The Speaker can't whip. Only whips of political parties can do that. So that would explain that. And I'm sure some MP, I'm not defending those that were sitting there cutting their toenails and, you know, having a coffee, but the timing of this was fairly instant, and it's genuinely possible. Quite a lot of MPs weren't even there to almost make themselves available for it happening. But it's either way, I tend to agree with Barry. It's not a good look, right? 0344 499 1000. We'll have more of your calls, lots more to talk about. Dale Vince is going to join us as well. If you're not part of if you've got money to invest, then some are suggesting you should invest it in the green revolution, because that's where the money is. It's worth £100 billion to this country. It's massive. Are you getting into wind farms and solar panels as a way of topping up your pension? Thoughts on that coming later. Oh, and the voice of doom. Day, what is it, Amy? 7. Day 7 of the Mystery Voice. Ryan, our producer's going, well, I've got no idea what you're talking about. All of that's coming up next on Talk.
let's get to the calls now. And Kevin is in Basingstoke. Morning, Kevin. Hey. Kevin, what do you think of this cycling conversation?
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to...
disagree with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's far more accidents caused by cars than bikes.
Yeah, we're not talking about cars, Kevin. We're talking about bikes.
I'm never talking about bikes, but if we encourage more bikes, then there'll be less accidents. More people...
yeah, more people on bikes who are not being controlled by anything.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We've got a lot of stuff up and running here, including the voice of doom. For those who don't know, it's a mystery voice bit. All you got to do is guess whose voice it is. It's quite a tricky one. It's been going for 7 days. No one's got it so far. It's a simple question. Who is this?
In how we think about...
I reckon that's got about a month or 3 months maybe left. I went from 1 month to 3. I don't know how. I reckon that's got a long time to run. It's tricky. Here it is again.
In how we think about...
Who is that? 87222 is the only way you can take part. There is no prize, but you do get the honour of saying you won it, which is great, isn't it? 87222 if you know who this is.
In how we think about...
If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. Let's go back to your calls and comments. This one's come from, is it Eros? Who says, as a 64-year-old who's worked for 50 years, I've always considered myself working class. I've always voted Conservative, except 2 years ago when I voted Reform. I've never viewed the Labour Party as a support for working people, and I've always considered them to be sympathisers of the welfare dependents who see this as a lifestyle choice. I can cite examples where 4 generations of families have never worked over the last 60 years. The Conservatives, though, have kowtowed to these people as well, which stops me trusting them again. I can see many problems with Reform, but I feel they are pragmatic and fair-minded with regards to policy. Restore worry me that they are an angry, reactionary protest party which will not help our nation heal and grow. And that completely encapsulates why Reform are riding high in the polls. We spoke to Sir John Curtis, whose latest research has suggested that Reform will, based on everything right now, will win the next general election. It's fascinating stuff, but they are chiming with a view and a feeling and a sense, a representation of people. And that's the bit the Tories have lost. I'm reminded, by the way, we were talking about it earlier, someone also messaged in on the fact this George Floyd comparison with the terrible things that have happened and the death of poor Henry Novak. And the House of Commons and the House of Lords had a minute's silence for George Floyd, which is so weird when you look at it now. And that was under the Conservatives, of course. Just curious. It wasn't even look, it was terrible what happened to George Floyd. I know he was loved a drug or two, and that wasn't what killed him, by the way. There's a lot of online urban mythology about that. And he had a bit of a criminal past. Didn't deserve to die, I wouldn't suggest that. And what the police officer did was clearly serious enough to send him to jail for a very, very long time. But it wasn't a racist attack. It wasn't a racist murder. It wasn't... race was no component to the case around the officer who went to jail for being responsible for his death, for killing him. And that's what makes it even weirder as we think about it now. Simon is in Glasgow, who's a new caller to the show. Simon, good afternoon to you.
Hello there, how you doing?
Very good, thanks. What are your thoughts?
Well, like I say, this is the first time I've called. It's like the Gordian knot, really, isn't it? It's where do you start? You know, it's kind of unpickable. I think this poor lad's death was absolutely tragic. I mean, it's outrageous on every level, really. But, you know, I was listening to your previous caller there with a gentleman from the army and whatnot, or the forces. And he did a very brilliant technical analysis of, you know, where the police went wrong. I think the one thing that's fundamentally missing here is the empathy, you know. And I think there's a real systemic problem that we have now in this country where, you know, the politicians say, oh, we went too far, the other side, they overcorrected and all that, you know, all these big words that they say. I just think now that we're in this situation where, you know, this DEI culture, or whatever you want to call it, it's sort of like infiltrated everything, and it's insidious. And, you know, basically that lad, this evil boy, this whatever his name is, Digwa, I think it was, that's called up, and his brother said, you know, it's a racist attack and all this sort of thing. And the police officer's first thought was, you know, to sympathise with the minority guy. And I think, you know,
without any kind of evidence. I mean, I appreciate. I'm not suggesting you don't take it seriously, and I know that in the past there's been some terrible events where police haven't taken it seriously, and they should have done. So I'm not saying it's easy, but he's a copper.
I don't think it's just that. I think that, you know, you look on a broader spectrum of this. You just look at, you know, I think, you know, you keep taking steps back, and try and see, like, diagnose the fault. I was a rail engineer for 20 years. You know, we tried to backtrack on a fault and stuff to try and look for the original problem. Yeah. And I think, you know, this government and previous governments, you know, I think this left, which I call it far left, you know, doctrine, has just sort of like infiltrated every aspect of our society. You know, it's in the universities, in our schools, it's in everything like this, and it's now going into our justice system. I think all our institutions have been infected with it. Look at the universities and stuff like that. And then when you have a government, let's take Tommy Robinson's rally, the United Kingdom, for instance. Just before that, we've had these pro-Palestine rallies every week, and they've been preaching nothing but anti-Semitism. Just let's face it, hate, right? Nothing's really getting mentioned about it every week. And then before the Tommy Robinson rally, you've got Keir Starmer out there sitting there the day before saying this far right. And if you keep saying this stuff for long enough, then it's going to happen. And at the end of the day, our children now, and that's what in my mind, he might have been 18, but he's a young boy. Our children, and then you go into the grooming grounds, they're being fed on the altar, sacrificed on the altar of this left-wing ideology. And I think something has to be done about this.
Something does have to be done about it. I have to stop you there, Simon, only because the news at 3 is coming right on us. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Welcome. The Afternoon Empire, the home of common sense, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. So research finds that the UK's growing green economy is worth over £100 billion annually. Brings in more jobs and higher wages. Do you believe? I mean, the green agenda is interesting because wherever you sit on the science, the economics would be attractive. There's Republicans in America, the most right of right-wingers, that say, do you know what, this makes absolute business sense. Let's go with it. We'll talk to Dale Vince in just a couple of moments on this very point. Also this afternoon, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has called the murder of student Henry Novak by Vikram Digwa as horrifying and an evil act. This follows, of course, the release of shocking body cam footage showing the moment the police put him in handcuffs as he lay dying. And one of Britain's leading pollsters, Sir John Curtis, who we spoke to earlier in the show, says Reform UK is now even more likely to win the next election. Issues such as Brexit, national identity and immigration mean that those who back the party are no longer casting a protest vote, but are ideologically attracted to reform. More details on that, loads more calls and comments as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. And this comes from Alan, who says, Ian, I'm 72. I genuinely believe the last Prime Minister to be truly patriotic to our once great country is Maggie. She may have made mistakes, but I always felt she made major decisions in the belief that it was in our best financial and security interests. She upset some sectors, but no one can deny that she had bigger testicles than all those that have succeeded her. Unlike today's politician, she really was not for turning. She must be now turning in her grave. Keep up the good work, says Alan. Now, let's move to this story then. And we've talked many times about environmental aspects of the world we currently live in, but Britain's net zero boom is now worth £105 billion a year. This is not according to a green left-wing think tank. This is according to the CBI. The report says that more than 300,000 people work directly in green jobs, rising to 1.1 million when you factor in the supply chains as well. It also claims net zero workers can earn more than $43,000 on average, which is 11% above the national average. What's not to like? Dale Vince is the founder of Ecotricity, green entrepreneur. Dale, good afternoon to you. I mean, you're going to say, yep, I've been telling you this for years.
I could say that, but I think that's not very constructive. I think what's really important here, you nailed it at the beginning, it's not a left-leaning bunch of commies that are saying this, it's the Confederation of British Industry. They've done a study, they've published a series of them, actually the last one showed the green economy growing 4 times as fast as the normal, the brown economy. And this one is quite stunning, 100 billion is the cost of Brexit. So the green economy is already plugging the Brexit hole for us, million jobs, 10% higher pay, and these are forever jobs. This is a really important thing. Green energy will never run out like the North Sea has run out on us. And so I think this is a fabulous piece of news, and I hope that a lot of people pay attention to it.
Isn't the, I mean, the numbers are big, and you and I have spoken about this, I don't know how many times, and I can never remember the organisation, but there used to be, or perhaps still is, a group of Republicans in the States that, you know, if you like, the right of the right, you know, more right-wing than Donald Trump, who've always said that, you know, there's money in them, they're green hills. You know, that was always the line. And if you go to Texas, you know, when Donald Trump said, I'm going to get rid of all the windmills and stuff like that, well, you know, there's a whole lot of Texans down there, Republican voting Texans, that have spent a lot of money and thousands of acres of wind farms that are existing in those hills of Texas, who clearly didn't get the memo that apparently, according to some thinkers, this is like throwing money down a well, because these guys are, you know, ahead of their game, and they spotted it. So you're right, it's not a left-wing, right-wing issue. So why the resistance over here?
I think all of the resistance is ideological. The things that Trump says and does in the US against green energy, particularly offshore wind, is just ideological. It's against all of the facts, but that's Trump's natural territory, to be against facts and reason and logic. Green energy has been our most economic choice for pushing 10 years now. It's just taking time for the message to get through. It's obscured by the complexities of our own energy market. For example, the link between the price of gas and the price of wind and sun that we really need to break, which drives our energy bills sky high during a crisis like the one we have now. People add 2 and 2 and make 5. Nigel Farage is famous favorite for this because he says, look, we've never had more green energy on the grid and we've never had higher bills. Therefore, one thing must lead to the other. And that's a very simplistic and very incorrect assumption to make. And, people fall for it.
If I can just put my, I don't know, right-wing hat on here for a second, which I winkled out just before the show, Dale, knowing we were going to be speaking about this. Many would say, look, come on, Dale, and others, it's the Chinese who actually are the chief beneficiaries of all of this. Our wind turbines, windmills, whatever you want to call them, the solar panels, there might be the odd fella down there making them in Weymouth or something, but broadly speaking, the Chinese are the chief recipients. We're subservient to them. So, yeah, we're making a few quid off it, but it's the Chinese that are really having it off royally.
I think the important thing for most people is having an affordable energy bill. And by building windmills and solar parks and stuff like that, we can make our own energy here. The important thing is that we price it here, which is why we have to break the link between that and the global price of gas. We haven't done that yet. Government said they were about a month ago, but it was fake announcement, actually. But the most important thing for most people is the cost of living. And green energy can help us bring bills down. It doesn't matter if we buy solar panels from China. 80% of the world's solar panels are made in China. It's a sensible, logical, business-like thing to do. And, I haven't got anything against the Chinese. I don't know why there's so much hatred for them in the world of politics and media. Most of the windmills, in the world, probably, they may come from China, but in Britain, mostly they're from Europe, actually. Do we hate the Europeans as well? Actually, maybe a lot of your listeners do, and we don't want to spend our money in Europe.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, are against the Chinese probably on sort of basic human rights level, Dale. I mean, they've not exactly getting any awards in that department.
How about Israel, then? I heard your last caller say that the Palestine marches preach anti-Semitism. It's a really gross mischaracterization of what those are about. But look at the human rights record of Israel. We do business with them. We sell them arms. We let them into Eurovision. We play football with them. What's going on with that?
I mean, don't come for Eurovision, Dale, whatever you do. I mean, I know it's your favourite time of the year when they start knocking out one of those La 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 tunes. It's an appointment to watch. What I was going to mention about the Chinese, though, in the sense of, them being sort of fairly dominant in this respect, that's fine, and green energy is doing what it's doing, and these numbers speak for themselves. A lot of people are going to be listening to this, Dale, going, but our energy bills are going up. We're meant to be getting all this green energy. It's meant to be free. It's coming from the weather, for goodness sake. Our bills are still going up. What are you doing over there at Ecotricity, Dale, with our bills? Why are you making them go up?
Yeah, so the biggest issue, I mentioned it twice already, is the link between the global price of fossil gas. It's set by a global market. It's driven by the war in the Middle East right now. It's gone very high. That sets also the price of our own wind and sun, which is just craziness. In the last energy crisis, only a couple of years ago, in 2023, it added £43 billion to our energy bills and 1.5 percentage points to inflation and 1% to Bank of England lending rates. It drove our cost of living up as well as our energy bills, which quadrupled. And all of it is unnecessary. It's a market mechanism that enriches just big energy companies and impoverishes millions of people. We have to break that link. Otherwise,
so why can't Ed Miliband? You know Ed Miliband a bit. Why can't you say, Ed, just break the link, for God's sake?
Yes, I've been saying it for years. And then a few weeks ago, he succumbed, it appeared, to public pressure. And there was a lot of it from Labour MPs, the media, all kinds of people saying, let's break the link. And he announced with Rachel Reeves that he was going to break the link. And the share price of big energy companies tanked by tens of billions of pounds on that announcement because they knew what it meant. 4 days later, he announced the details and he wasn't breaking the link. Those share prices recovered all of the lost money because he wasn't breaking the link.
Why is he not breaking the link, though? I mean, you know, Ed's seen as an evangelist in this area. I mean, even when you've talked about continuing with drilling or oil manufacturing from the oil from the North Sea, you know, Ed is kind of like, you know, he can't face that one, it seems. He's having none of it right now. He might change his mind, but if anyone you'd think was going to break the link, it would be him.
Yeah, well, it's not even a radical green thing to do. It's got nothing to do with net zero. It's all about logic, actually. Why do we have a market system that gives generators of wind and sun energy the same price as gas? They don't ask for it. There's a daily auction. They bid what they want. They don't get what they bid. They get what gas bids, which is just madness. On North Sea oil and gas, me and Ed are in the same place. All I'm saying about that is let's use what we have. I'm not in favor of new drilling, and it often gets confused. I'm saying make the most of what we have. We should give a CFD to the North Sea, which is a fixed price contract we use for green energy, and we can protect the jobs and the investment and maximize extraction in the last 10 years that we've got left. That's what I say.
But, I mean, in terms of, just to go back to that breaking the link thing, I mean, there will be people that argue, and it sounds a bit tinfoil hatty, that the reason Ed Miliband isn't breaking the link is because the paymasters and the powerful and those big oil companies are too influential and no one wants to upset them. Now, I'd find that a bit curious because they need us more than anything, so they need consumers. What do you suspect is the reason why Ed Miliband, who could simply say, we're going to break this link and it will demonstrably make things cheaper, the fact that he's not doing it, Dale, what's your assessment of that?
I'm at a loss, actually, to understand why. I've spoken to him about it many times over the years, presented the macroeconomic modelling that shows the harm it does to our economy, shared it with Rachel Reeves as well. The evidence is clear. It's an unnecessary price-inflating link that we could just do away with. Nobody ever says to me, this is what the link is good for, this is why we have to keep it, because there is nothing. And so all that really leaves is a conspiracy theory that you just mentioned here, that he's afraid to upset big businesses.
Well, indeed, when there's a vacuum, people will fill it with all sorts of theories. And I mean, if reform come along, and I mentioned, you probably heard when you were hanging on, that reform are kind of, you know, set to win the next election based on current figures. If they said they're going to break the link, does that mean you'll become a reform donor and a cheerleader for Nigel Farage?
Probably not.
I mean, you know Nigel a bit. You've always got on with him when you've met him, Dale.
He's a very kind of affable guy. But look, I did think of sending the break the link stuff to reform out of desperation, really. And then, Ed turned around and said he was going to do it. But, you know, maybe it's not too late. But the Greens support breaking the link. The Lib Dems support breaking the link. I don't know where the Tories stand on it. But, you know, the more cross-party consensus we could have, the better, because it's simply better for the people in our country to get energy bills down. So I don't really care who supports it.
Yeah, the Tories have probably never heard of it. That's the reality of that.
Here's the thing. They passed a bill. Liz Truss did one thing in her month in power that's memorable. She passed a bill that enabled the Tories to break the link. Because we contacted them, we said, look at the harm this link is doing. And it was at the height of the energy crisis. They passed the bill and it still sits on the statute books today. And we've told Labour that the power to break the link is already there. All you have to do is use it.
So thanks to Liz Truss. I mean, a phrase I never thought I'd use.
Yes.
Good old Liz. There's always some silver lining. Thank you, Dale, as ever. Dale Vince is the founder of Ecotricity. On that breaking the link, which is sort of the artificial way that the energy bills are hiked, according to that argument, I'd love to get, I mean, you will disagree with a lot. I wasn't going to pursue the Israel stuff and China and, you know, 'cause we weren't here to talk about that. That's a whole other debate, and we've done it many, many times. You can have your own views on that. But I am interested in the breaking the link thing, because it's not something that gets headlines, and you don't see it talked about on the news at 10, and it doesn't very often find its way on the agenda on Question Time or any of that kind of stuff. But the theory is, if you break the link by the way that our energy prices are artificially set based on I think the highest cost of gas on any particular day, and that sets the price, or something of that nature. I don't fully get my head around this either, but is there a counter-argument to what Dale's just said? Because most people agree that if you broke it, and Liz Truss created a law that allows you to break it, then why would you not break it if it would bring energy bills down? Does that mean if they came down, then all the associated taxation would also come down, less money for the government? Is it as simple as that? Thoughts on that one? 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Brad in Cambridge. It says, Theresa May killed off the Conservative Party. I was a member at the time. I felt more like a member of the Liberal Party. Reform have given me a home. Johnson's win was a Brexit anomaly. Brad in Cambridge says that. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like that. It's funny, isn't it, the perception of Theresa May, and I think this was only because she was a bit of an awkward, bookish, studious-like head teacher figure. The perception of her was that she was an absolute arch right-winger. She was right over there in the right-wing department. And yeah, she was the one that got rid of all the police when she was Home Secretary. All right, it wouldn't have been a decision she was allowed to do on her own, but she did. And certainly she wasn't a Brexiteer. And turns out she was, you know, a very, very centrist, liberal conservative. Not the hardline school head teacher that people imagined. And that was really just based on her kind of demeanour more than anything else. She looked like that, sounded like that, but actually wasn't. 0344 499 1000.
Let's get to the calls now. And Kevin is in Basingstoke. Morning, Kevin. Hey. Kevin, what do you think of this cycling conversation?
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to...
disagree with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's far more accidents caused by cars than bikes.
Yeah, we're not talking about cars, Kevin. We're talking about bikes.
I'm never talking about bikes, but if we encourage more bikes, then there'll be less accidents. More people...
yeah, more people on bikes who are not being controlled by anything.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Mark in Stratford says at least Farage has come out and said something about this. He is correct in what he says, by the way. It's not hard. Well, it is obviously hard for people like Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, to slightly lesser degree Kemi Badenoch. She hasn't quite hit that. She's had some better moments at things like Prime Minister's Questions, and she's raised her game. And it's that curious dilemma that the Tories have got where their party leader is more popular than the party. So there's quite a lot of right-wingers that quite like a lot of what Kemi is saying, but they just can't ever trust the Conservatives. But it comes down to the pre-prepared press release dilemma that people like Starmer have. You know, when he did all that before the Unite the Kingdom rally, whatever anybody thinks about that and whatever anybody thinks about some of those that might attend, we all know, if you've got a brain, that it wasn't some mad extremist powwow of people who, you know, all had a shaven head and a BNP tattoo on their arse. I mean, it wasn't that at all, by any measure, OK? You have to look at it. So for the Prime Minister, before it even happened, to come out and sort of malign a whole group of people in this way, it not only is it sort of anti-intellectual mumbo-jumbo, I mean, it's just... it's slightly own goal territory for him, although I think I know what he was doing. He was obviously thought, well, I've lost that crowd. They're never going to vote for me anyway, so I might as well attack them. Then I'll have the, you know, the backing of sort of Corbynites and people like that. He was doing that, but it was very considered and thought about. But even that never came with any passion. He never speaks with any passion. He never has. You never have a sense of going, wow. And I know this, you know, great orators are sometimes born and not made, and I understand that, and some people have the gift of the gab. In an ideal world, politics would not be about how seductive you are at the dispatch box or how effective and mesmeric you might be when making a speech in the town square or standing in a field or on a TV interview. You know, it should be about your philosophically driven ideas and your direction of travel. I get that, but you know what? It's the 21st century, and it kind of is a little about verve and, you know, your mojo and what you can bring to the party in terms of taking people with you, sounding like you mean business, sounding like you believe it, feeling like you've got a message. And yes, it has to be true behind all the feelings, because feelings can be quite dangerous in themselves. There's got to be some content, and that content's got to be worked through and delivered. You have to do that. Time will tell. But we just don't get that feel from many of our politicians. One of the reasons Trump did so well at the last election and continues to do, I know he's having a bit of a wobble, but continues to do rather well, is because of that sense of, you know, I'm not going to read from a press release, I'll tell you what I think. And we need some of that, and that's exactly what Nigel Farage did on the statement this morning on Henry. Let's have a listen. We've been talking about Henry Novak, and we should continue to talk about Henry Novak and this appalling murder and this horrifying end to the 18-year-old's final moments on this planet. You've seen the video. It's distressing. It's haunting. I'm just going to say what everybody's said. It's not the fact that it is disturbing in the sense of what you see in the world of social media, where you see a lot of terrible stuff. It's haunting because of the conversation that the police are trying to have, the handcuffing, and as his dad said yesterday outside the court, the last thing his son heard while dying of multiple stab wounds and drowning in his own blood were his rights being read to him. It's horrific whatever way you look at this. In the last hour, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has been speaking about Henry in the House of Commons. Let's have a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement about the murder of Henry Novak. But let me be clear. Carrying a knife for the purpose of religious observance is one thing. Using it, as so tragically occurred in this case, is quite another. It is a vile act, a crime of the utmost severity. We cannot allow this murder to turn communities against one another. We condemn those who committed this heinous crime, not all those who share their faith or their ethnicity. We do not believe in collective punishment in this country. Instead, we stand together against an act of pure evil.
Can I just say something on the back of that? Carrying a knife is not OK, all right? It's not one thing, as she just said there. It's not acceptable. If you are a Sikh and want to do that, you don't have to do that. This was an exceptionally large knife. You will find very few Sikhs in this country carrying anything like that. It might even just be a pin in a turban that is enough to clarify the significance and the symbolism of that. You don't need to carry a knife. You shouldn't be allowed to carry a knife. And certainly, if you wanted to have a debate on, you know, size of knife, this murderer was carrying something no one would say was OK. Let's talk to Phil in Hertfordshire on this story. Phil, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I just listened to what she just said in Parliament, and that just turned my stomach. She's just deflected. No one is going on about communities going against each other. That's not even been mentioned, Ian. The thing that's been mentioned is the treatment of poor Henry by the police. So where was she grabbing that from about the communities and now looking to go against each other? No, they're not.
Yeah.
She's totally deflected and misread the room. Whether it's intentional or not, I do not know. Just the way Kemi did earlier, you've misread the room. And what she used is this situation to have a little pot politically at Nigel Farage. Now, Nigel Farage has read the room. He feels and he can sense the feeling and the flavour of the people in this country. And anybody, whether you're left or right, are not sickened by that, then you need to look at yourself in the mirror.
Do you know what? Even, probably without her even realising it, she committed the same issue as the police did in some respects, because she couldn't help herself but go there when she says, you know, it's one thing carrying a knife. No, it's not. That's not OK anywhere. That's not all right. She had to still tick that box.
Yeah, they totally misread the room. They're totally showing disregard for the majority of the good people of this country, whatever your ethnic minority is. Nobody would want to see their children or their child treated like that, regardless. And she's totally deflected it away from the real issue, which is the way the police treated Henry. And also, Ian, I can't wait until I see these sports personalities, these A-listers, celebrities, and then the main people of this country standing with their arms crossed as if in cuffs above their head with their T-shirts. I can't breathe. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold my breath, though.
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling that that's not going to be something anytime soon any of us see. But I hear you. Listen, Phil, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. This from Biggie says, Ian, this story has left me feeling sick. After watching this, before my anger, I felt I wanted to pick the young lad up and hold him. He was treated worse than livestock. I have a son at university. To imagine this can happen to him because the police are paralysed by their woke ideology, identity policing. Racism seems is the kryptonite of all senses at the cost of all true logic and morality. And it's kind of curious that that's how the kind of you have to assume. Look, I know we don't know, and you know somebody did message yesterday and said, look, for all we know, because I was talking about police officers being sent on, well, not just police, establishment, government bodies being sent on so many training courses about sensitivities that you kind of lose sight of common sense. We know that is and has been a problem. One of the reasons Donald Trump got elected was on a backlash almost to all of this kind of nonsense, where, it was almost creating the very problem it set out to solve. And you know what? From some campaigners, that's kind of how they want it. But nonetheless, you look at how many issues we could cite where this sort of thinking has cost lives. How often do we have to see these stories? Something happened there where the mere accusation of racism was somehow more important than a guy who, even if you didn't know he'd been stabbed, he's clearly struggling on the ground, gasping for breath, can hardly utter his own name. The only thing he's able to really say is, I can't breathe. 9 times. Now, how bad can it get when you make that decision? I mean, the handcuffs, man alive. Really? Did you need handcuffs in that moment? But the only conclusion you reach for in all of this is that the police were so seduced by, well, it's an accusation of racism, almost as if, sexual assault wouldn't have got that reaction. All these things are equally as bad, by the way. They're all bad things. Only a moron knows that. But you don't use it as the only barometer against which you react to something. He's on the ground. He's a wrong 'un. He's a racist. Let's get the cuffs on. Been stabbed. I don't think you have, mate. Can't breathe. Yeah, fine. This in from Sean, like the rest, Mahmood doesn't get it. We are enraged about police behaviour as much as the mindless racist murder itself, says Sean in Bridlington. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls on the way. Should we quickly do the Voice of Doom payoff? Let's just quickly do that. Did we get a winner? This was the mystery voice we played you about 40 minutes ago. Have a listen.
In how we think about...
Very simple. Who is that? These are some of the guesses. Ellie Reeves, no. Amber Rudd. Teresa Gorman, no. Hannah Spencer, it is not. Nusgani, no. Shabana Mahmood, no. It is none of those. Didn't get a right answer. It rolls over for day 8 tomorrow. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 4. Robert in Wishaw says, if the green energy sector is so amazingly productive financially, why are we having to subsidise it via our energy bills? Yeah, fair point. George in Cornby, you didn't ask Dale Vince how to fill up petrol and diesel cars with renewables, how you fill up airliners with renewables, and how you fill up cargo ships with renewables. This one comes in from Chris. Dale Vince said, and I quote, 80% of the world's solar panels come from China. I don't understand why they are so hated. Sorry, Dale, it's time to wake up. It's not the Chinese that are hated. It's the fact that cheap coal energy is used in the production process. Of course, Dale will trumpet his corporate line. One in from Mark in Stratford. Dale Vince couldn't resist getting his anti-Israel dig in, could he? I find him insufferable. Mark, he speaks very well of you, I have to say. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Herbie in Harrow. Back to our main story here. Herbie, what have you got for us? Hi.
Oh, good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I would like Nigel tomorrow at the House of Commons to ask the Prime Minister to have a minute's silence for this poor soul that was murdered in Southampton, like we did for the black man in All Lives Matter in America, All Lives Matter in this country as well. At before question time, PQ's question time, that will embarrass them because they don't seem to be doing anything for us at all, Ian. It's just scandalous. Nothing's been done. 3 days before even Sir Keir Starmer even mentioned this poor soul. I can't believe it. I really can't.
It is quite extraordinary, given the nature of this, and I've never tried to pretend that there is when people talk about racism and white people being the victim of racism. I've never sort of gone along with that idea that white people have the same backstory as non-white. I mean, it'd be ridiculous to say, any of us. I don't know what that's like to have somebody call me the P word or the N word, or to be compromised because of literally the colour. I've got no history of that, neither has my entire race, to look at it like that. That doesn't mean, of course, that you can't still have racism, and because you can still have racism. Both things can be true. And what happened here is the copper, it seems, or the coppers, were clearly running with an agenda that transpires to be, certainly nipping heavily at the heels of racism, because a decision was made based on the colour of his skin.
Well, I've heard people say, including the coloured people, white trash. I mean, so what does that mean then?
Well, yeah, of course there can be there's such a thing as a racist incident. Of course there is.
Yes, of course there is. But the thing is, though, Ian, this poor soul, the police normally search everybody for drugs and this, that and the other, for other weapons. Another inch and they would have seen the stab wound. Now, to me, these people are really unaccountable to act the way they did. This poor lad died when he needn't have died because of their stupidity of being...
Well, I think, and I know it's a tricky area, that all of the reports suggest that he was probably beyond being saved, but it can't have helped. The point. Yeah, you're right. It's not really the point. The point is, some level of dignity, some level of understanding would have been helpful. And I appreciate they weren't shouting or swearing at him, and they were quite gentle, but completely inept, because we've seen it, and tragically so.
Let's have this 1 minute silence tomorrow, Ian. That would do the nation proud, I think, if we did that.
I think
1 minute silence, that's all we need. That's all we need.
I think you're absolutely right. I hear it. Listen, thank you, Herbie, for that. And we did have 1 minute silence. I'd totally forgotten about it till I was looking at it this morning, and then somebody reminded us a little earlier that when George Floyd, a bloke 4,000 miles away, a bit of a wrong one, didn't deserve to die, and nobody would suggest he did. But we had sort of marches and stuff in this country. And when I look back at it, it's a bit cringy, and it's just very, very weird. And the world, suddenly we were transported back to as if the United Kingdom was like Johannesburg in the 60s, or the deep south of America in the 70s. I mean, it was just... Or even the UK in the 80s, it was like, what's going on here? What are we marching for? What's the campaign here? Nobody could really quite fathom it, but every establishment seemed to go along with it, because they thought, if I don't go along with this, I'm going to be seen as, we're going to be seen as bad guys. So everyone went along with it. The House of Commons, the speakers of the House of Commons, convened a minute's silence, in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. So both houses had a minute's silence for a bloke 4,000 miles. I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous. And there's been lots of cases where, the police have an impossible job. I'm a big defender of the police, as I think you know by now, because I happen to believe they are still, that they are still by far a force that are on our side, who are up against and working with politics and pay and conditions that are often insufferable, making their job near on impossible. And when you see some of the work the police do, it doesn't take a genius to sit for 2 minutes and think about what they mostly do, mostly day in, day out, to realise that, it is a job like no other, and one that you or I would probably not want to go near. That doesn't mean to say they are beyond criticism, or the system is beyond pointing out when something's wrong. And this definitely, the whole George Floyd thing, that you had Keir Starmer getting down on one knee, you had people in the street insisting police officers got down on one knee. It was just ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. I was almost waiting for a minute's silence at 6 p.m. on the TV every night. For what was everybody lost sight of what it was. How can I be a nicer person? Oh, yeah, I know what I'll do. It's that George Floyd fella, I suppose. Nobody wanted a bloke to die. But the reaction, I mean, man alive, did you ever see anything like it? America almost burnt to the ground. Biden said nothing. Ian, down in London, what have you got for us, Ian? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Oh, here we go. Right. There's two or three things very, very quickly. I'll go through them.
Yeah.
First of all, this happened back in November, correct?
Yeah.
Right. How quick did Starmer make sure that all the people that were sort of supposedly rioting and right wingers were in front of juries and everything else within 2 minutes? This has taken nearly 7 months.
Yeah. Starmer isn't responsible for people being in juries, by the way, but that's another story.
But you can be sure that whoever was the Home Office minister at that time knew within a couple of weeks at what had gone on here.
Yeah.
So why is it only today they've had a cabinet meeting to say they're going to sort out what's going wrong with the police?
Isn't that... I mean, when the riot situation, which you reasonably raise here, Ian, I get it, but that's the exception, isn't it? What normally happens with a murder case is they do take months to prepare because everybody is entitled to a defence, and putting together a case and all the evidence and everything that is needed is quite time-consuming.
No, we know that, and that I don't sort of think it's like you mustn't describe it beforehand because it could be prejudicial to the case.
Exactly.
Is that the right way of saying it?
Yeah, absolutely right.
There's no way that if the cabinet is sort of watertight, which we know they're never because of what came out in those WhatsApp messages yesterday.
Good point.
Right. They should have been dealing with this earlier in-house, right? Number one. Number two, yes, other people have said it on your show, without doubt, with Joy Floyd, they took the knee, and it wasn't just Starmer, it was Rayner. She was getting down quicker than he was.
Oh, she couldn't help herself. I mean, it was just sort of laughable. But it's an odd gesture as well, getting on one knee. It's not like a 10-second dip your head and have a moment of remembrance. It's quite a gesture, quite a bit of choreography when you're in a rainy car park for someone to go, get on one knee, show your respect, man. I mean, everything about it was just weird and bizarre. Get on one knee, get in the bin, mate. Don't get on one knee for anybody.
And why
I don't care what colour your skin is, I don't care what your cause is. I'm not getting on one knee.
And why aren't all, as you call it, said, like sports, the England team, without a doubt, and the Scottish team should be taking the knee and everything else and just saying, this is not for...
Yeah, we had it with all the football teams as well. It was just so cringy, just so awful.
The whole thing.
Yeah,
right. And
everybody gave it a go.
Right? One last thing, you're going to laugh at this.
Go on.
I sell nail clippers online, right? I've been told I cannot sell them anymore by eBay. Nail clippers. And yet this guy was walking around with a blade.
Yeah.
Like that was about, was it 8 inches or 10 inches long?
Something of that nature. It was significant. And, it obviously killed a young guy.
You cannot sell nail clippers.
You can't flog a pair of nail clippers. I mean, I've got to ask, who would buy somebody else's nail clippers? Is that fair?
No. They're just a pack of 3 that, like, if you wanted to, you're going away. Yeah.
Sell those online either.
Right, one last thing, Ian.
Yes.
And this is to go with somebody who you had on earlier, and he tried to bring it in. I think you cut him short with Dale Vince, and he starts off again with Israel. The guy... I want to know how many solar systems his guys went out and sold, and they put on the panels, not facing south, not actually doing exactly what they did. And he has got a tie-up with Miliband, and that's where they're making the money. It's all rubbish with him. He loves to bring it in.
When you say he's got a tie-up, I mean, he's not in business with Miliband, I should say.
Well, no, but he gets all of the sort of like, they get extra money for doing the work, and they're always provided like the subsidies and everything else.
Yeah, well, Dale will say he doesn't get any subsidies.
No, it's all...
The last thing that was signed off as a government contract, I think, to Dale Vince, was actually started by the Conservatives, which brings us back to what we've been talking about all afternoon, as to whether there's much of a difference between the Tories or Labour. Listen, Ian, I've got to run just for time, no other reason. Thank you for that. The latest on the two-tier policing argument. Keir Starmer has denied that two-tier policing exists after a row broke out, of course, after the murder of young Henry. Responding to Nigel Farage's comments this morning, the PM spokesman said there's no such thing as two-tier policing. The police enforce the law without fear or favour. That is what the police do. We are categorical that they must treat everyone equal regardless of their ethnicity. This is their remit. But as I've also said in this particular case, it's absolutely right that the IOPC investigates the police response swiftly and delivers the answers that are required. I mean, the two-tier policing thing also drives me to want to gnaw off my own elbows. Is there a two-tier policing, as in a load of people sit around at a table and say, right, when you police this group of people, don't arrest anyone. When you police this group of people, do arrest her? No, there isn't. The consideration would be, are we likely to get more hassle, by forming an arrest here or less? Are we likely to get accused of something if we arrest somebody? It's not perfect. It's not a conscious two-tier policing, as in that there's a policy in place. What there is a manifestation that quite clearly decisions are made that are at odds with other decisions that were made when you're talking about exactly the same crime. I should add, that's not an entirely new thing. I've been doing this job long enough, and we've had so many debates on why is it that a bloke in Newcastle that carried out a crime got 2 years suspended, and a bloke in Penzance carried out exactly the same crime and he got 7 years in prison. Those debates are not entirely new. They're not two-tier. They're in isolation in different areas. They involve different police services, different considerations, different judges, and of course, ultimately, different juries. And that's not to defend wrongdoing. And when something's wrong, let's call it out. But Keir Starmer, again, misses the point, because it's not about strictly two-tier policing. Nigel Farage isn't literally making the point that there's a policy either. He's making the point that the manifestation of years of rot ends like this. And that's what's happened. For whatever reason, and you can see it in that video, the reaction from law enforcement was woeful, and it's very difficult not to say that was because a white kid had been accused of racism, and therefore the police pounced. And it's funny, isn't it, when we talk about, is everyone a bad apple? Is it, the whole of the... When Stephen Lawrence was murdered, the Macpherson report came out, and its overarching conclusion, it's the phrase that everybody remembers, institutional racism was an issue. I think this was the Met Police specifically, as distinct from all the police. The police are institutionally racist, meaning not that every copper was a racist, but there was a malaise that threaded itself through the police, so that when they turned up and Stephen Lawrence was laid there dead, their thinking was instinctively, it's just another black kid who's died. I'm simplifying it here. It's just another black kid that's died. And the consequent inquiry was curtailed by that kind of thinking. Now, I don't dispute that was probably the case. There will be officers that worked on the case who will absolutely argue against it. So there was a sense that it was treated differently because he was a black kid. We will never fully know. But that was the argument. I can see why maybe there was a problem. It doesn't make the whole force institutionally racist. What we've got here is something so frighteningly similar, not identical in all of the other elements, but so similar in terms of response that you would have to surely intelligently apply the same conclusion, would you not? And that's the point that Nigel Farage was getting at, and that's the point that Keir Starmer has missed again. 0344 499 1000.
It's Danny Tyler! Wig, not wig.
It's a nutty canister, either way. I mean, look at the nut.
Bob Odenkirk! Saul was great. He was just a breath of fresh air. Amelia Clark! Star Wars versus Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, definitely.
Go.
I'm loyal.
Don't tell Alex Hassel!
In season 2, a lot of us get our clothes off.
You do know you did that in season 1.
Exactly, that's true, yes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Pete in Teesside says, Shabana Mahmood says we shouldn't group people together by race or the actions of a few. When has she spoken out against groupthink like white privilege or you can't be racist towards white people? This one in from No Name Given. Ian, the police have priorities. Firstly, is the crime scene safe? 2, preserve life. 3, preserve evidence. Then talk to both sides and determine what happened. Shocking wokeness by the cops. I don't even know whether... Well, it kind of amounts to that. When you hear the police officers talking to Henry... they're fairly neutral on it. They're not shouting at him. They're not accusational at that point. It's just weird, and simultaneously they're not taking seriously a young lad saying 9 times, "I can't breathe." Let's talk to Jim, who's in Dumfries. Jim, good afternoon to you.
Hi there, Ian.
Hi, what do you got for us?
Well, while I'm not a supporter of reform, I agree with Farage on this one, and on one point, I disagree with you.
Mm-hmm. Far away. All ears at this end, Jim.
I think it was a racist attack.
Mm-hmm.
Not by Henry, but by the other guy.
Oh, so you think the... 'cause I wasn't talking about the attack, I was talking about the police, whether the police response was racist. But the other... So you think the guy attacked him in a race... Yeah, I mean, that may well be the case. I'm happy to certainly concur with that.
It's because he pulled the race card when the police arrived. So, you know, some people... I've heard various people saying, oh, this is not a race attack, this is not a race attack. I think it is, because if you pull the race card, it becomes a race attack.
Well, I would also argue, you know, if we agree that racism is abhorrent and, you know, horrific, unnecessary, awful, you know, a low, dirty crime, to judge somebody on their skin colour, etc. If you then make up an accusation, then that should almost be as bad. So, because if you called somebody a paedophile and said that person has just sexually assaulted me, then we would treat that with, you know, and they hadn't, then, you know, you would treat it very seriously. And if somebody, therefore, fakes racism, that should also be treated seriously.
My answer to that is that would depend who made the accusation of sexual assault.
That's a fair point.
You know,
that's a fair point.
we know that it does depend on who you are.
What do you think happens with this story? Because we're not going to get people taking the knee, and we're not going to get a silence in Westminster for 60 minutes, 60 seconds. We're not going to get any of that. Where do you think this story... How does it... What is going to be the sort of legacy of this story?
I think there will be, or there has to be now, with all the publicity, some kind of a police inquiry.
Well, the IOPC are investigating, so that will deal with the police response. Whether it goes bigger than that in terms of whether this response is potentially typical in similar situations, this is obviously as serious as it gets, but in similar situations, is this response replicated elsewhere?
I think, I mean, it's not a good thing to say, but I think once the investigation is done, it will fade away.
And you oh, Jim, you might be right, mate, and I hope it isn't. I've got to move because we've literally come to the end of the show. Thank you for calling, though. You've been a great caller, first-time caller as well. I don't want this to fade away. It's still dominating the headlines. It should still dominate the headlines. Mark Dolan's going to be here with Drive In for Kevin O'Sullivan in a few moments' time, Mark. Afternoon.
Well, it's really good to see you, and there's only one story in town, and this is about ideology. This is about political correctness, woke, call it what you like. It's the hierarchy of skin colour, race, religion, and it's got to stop. We have to become one United Kingdom again, one community, and the police have to go after criminals, irrespective of what they look like.
Kemi Badenoch made a similar point. She said, you know, when Nigel Farage was talking about Black Lives Matter,